The third year was awful. That ends. And the first one.
That's also the first parenting role.
We're ready. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 2023 edition of the Township of Muskoka Lakes Planning Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. I will confirm that we have all members of committee here, one of them being on Zoom. I will also confirm that we have the CAO, the clerk, deputy clerk, Director of Development Services, Environmental Sustainability, and other members of staff. The public agenda was invited. The public agenda was invited through, or was published on. How does this read here? Chair, the public agenda, the public input on the agenda. And it was invited through email to the township. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. And by participating in the open public meeting, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. We have no supplementary agenda today. All delegates today have 5 minutes, and I would ask delegates to not repeat things that have been stated by other delegates. You can just point out that you agree with what has been previously said. We now move to the first item on the agenda. We have some zoning bylaw amendment applications, and the first one is ZBA 08/23 bylaw 2023-033. And I believe Ms. Walker is our planner on this item.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair Bosenworth. The first application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 08/23 bylaw 2023-033 in the name of Claxton Holdings Incorporated. The subject property is known municipally as One Island Owl M43. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted site plans on page 18 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant is proposing a mechanical building. A mechanical building was previously approved through bylaw 2011-83 in a specific building envelope. The proposed exemption will permit a mechanical building to be constructed in a different location than previously approved. The applicant is also proposing to construct 2 dock additions. The existing docks were approved at their current extent and location by bylaw 2011-83, and the proposed exemption would permit an addition to the length of 2 of the existing docks. Bylaw 2023-033 will also permit a cumulative dock width of 116 feet. A dock width of 119 feet was previously approved. Notice of this public meeting under the Planning Act was circulated 21 days in advance, and 3 submissions have been received to date. Comments were received from Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official, Tim Sopko, the Township's Public Works Technician, Curtis Savret, Planner for the District of Muskoka. These submissions were all circulated to committee prior to today's meeting, and I'm happy to read any submission in full at the request of committee. I've prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 08/23 bylaw 2023-033 Claxton Holdings Incorporated be approved. I have no further comments, but I'm happy to assist committee with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walker. I believe the applicant's agent is here. If you could identify yourself with your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, Council. My name is Jack Lorenz from the Toning Group in Port Carling, 3 Armstrong Point Road, Port Carling, POB 1J0. I'm here on behalf of our client, Jason Claxton. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for preparing the presentation. As noted, so there's going to be a dock extension for the existing boathouse, as well as a proposed boat port, as well as a swim dock extension to the south of the property, and then also the mechanical building relocation, which is intended to be used as storage, have a washroom for any staff, as well as be used for some of the other mechanical on the property. as well as Jason, the property owner, is also here to answer any of the questions that you may have, as well as myself. So.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant wishing to speak as well?
Not unless anyone has any specific questions. The main driver behind this is there's almost a 100-year-old boathouse on the property that I've been trying to get around to getting repaired and renovated. It's in a sad state of repair, and the intention is to keep a lot of the existing structure, as much of the existing structure of the boathouse as possible, to retain the original character of it. And so we're trying to retain the framing, the masonry, and some of the other elements there, but we do intend to shore it up with a steel foundation to make sure that it hopefully lasts for another 100 years. So that's the real driver behind it. We had an original approval for a mechanical building on the original work that we did back in 2014, which was never constructed, which we now regret because we don't have proper storage for equipment, tools, to actually utilize the space as best as we can. And that's really the mainstay of it. I don't know, Jack, if I missed anything there.
That's
Sorry,
fine.
Jack.
Mr. Klassen, could you provide us with your address?
Yes, I'm located, my residence is in Toronto at 183 Wellington Street West, Suite 3504, postal code M5V0A1.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody wishing to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone wishing to speak against this application? I will turn it over to the committee for questions to the applicants and the planner. Seeing none, I will call the question. Moved by Councillor Ken, seconded by Councillor Mazin. Be it resolved, the Planning Committee recommend to Township Council the zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 08/23 bylaw 2023-033 be approved. Any discussion? I call the vote then. All those in favor? Carried.
That's a minor now. I don't think we need.
Now we have the minor amendment.
I don't think there is any.
Oh, sorry.
That's just in case
No,
there were to
that's
come up
just
with one.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. Then the next one is ZBA 09/23 bylaw 2023-09. And this is Mr. Soya.
Thank you, Chair Bosenworth, and good morning, committee. So the next application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 09/23 in the name of Brown. And this subject property is located at 1218 Hamels Point Road, and it has a shoreline frontage on Lake Joseph. The applicant intends to construct a two-story garage with storage in the upper level and to demolish and reconstruct a legal non-complying two-story boathouse, but with an enlarged first story. And the current docks are also to be replaced with enlarged docks, and a building permit has been issued for this proposed dock reconstruction. I would direct committee's attention to the site plans, floor plans, and elevation drawings starting on page 39 of today's agenda package. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to provide two exemptions. On Lake Joseph, the maximum permitted cumulative width of the first story of a boathouse is 19% of the lot frontage. In this case, the subject property has a lot frontage of 236 feet, and the maximum permitted first story boathouse width is therefore 37.8 feet. The proposed 12-foot width enlargement is 8.2 feet wider than is permitted, resulting in a total proposed width of 46 feet, and an exemption is therefore requested. The maximum permitted lot coverage within 200 feet of the high water mark is 10%. In this case, the existing development plus the proposed garage and boathouse enlargement would result in a lot coverage of 10.9% within 200 feet of the high water mark, and an exemption is therefore requested. Notice of the public meeting was circulated 21 days in advance of today's meeting in accordance with the Planning Act, and 6 submissions have been received to date. The District Municipality of Muskoka and the Township's Development Services and Public Works staff have advised they have no objections. 3 submissions have been received from members of the public, which I will summarize, and I can also read in full if requested by committee. David Pedwell, the owner of the abutting property to the east, has advised that he has no objections. Cindy Adler, the owner of the abutting property to the west, has also advised that she is in support of the proposal. Janet and Barry Brackley, owners of a nearby property to the north, submitted a letter stating that they are opposed to the extension of the boathouse as proposed, as the existing 2-story boathouse is considered to be legal non-complying due to the property's lot frontage, and the enlargement will require an exemption from the zoning bylaw. The letter also states that the maximum permitted 1st-story boathouse width is 37.8 feet. The requested exemption to permit an additional 8.2 feet equates to a width that is 21% greater than the width permitted as of right. Staff have prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration and have recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment application be denied. It is the opinion of staff that the cumulative impact of existing proposed development on the property will result in built form dominating over natural form, especially along the shoreline. The staff report also suggests that committee could consider a deferral to allow the applicant with time to consider revising the proposal with the aim of lessening built form and bringing elements of the proposal into greater compliance. And it is my understanding that the applicant and his agent are here this morning to speak to the application and staff's suggestion for revisions. I have no further comments at this time and would be happy to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soya. I believe we have the applicant's agent and the applicant present. So if you could start with your name and address, please, and you have 5 minutes.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. Lenny Dennis Planning, Box 254, Nova, Ontario, P0A1R0. I'm here this morning. I represent the owner, Mr. Brown, who is here, and he would like to provide a presentation as well as answer any questions. I had the opportunity to review the report and listen to the presentation, and I agree that's consistent with the staff that it's consistent with the 2020 BPS, conforms to the district official plan, but I also believe that it also conforms to the township's official plan. Just as a way, a bit of background, is my understanding, and before Lanny, that there were discussions with staff, pre-consultation, etc. And there were iterations done, and the proposal was reduced in size to make it more in compliance with the township's zoning bylaw. I think the merits in terms of conformity with the local OP are as follows. The modest size single story, which is 288 square feet addition for storage, this is what has triggered this zoning bylaw amendment process. The addition is 1 story. The 2nd story of the boathouse will not be extended. It's staying as is. It's a legal non-conforming structure and would be replaced 1 for 1. The increase in width is to the 1st story, as noted by the township planner, is 8.2 feet wide. The addition itself is tucked up against the shoreline, furthest from the lake, and the idea with that is to minimize the visual impact from the shoreline. The shoreline is reasonably well buffered with existing mature vegetation. It acts as a very good natural backdrop for the property and the proposed addition. The overall lot coverage is decreased from the permitted 11% to 10.9%, albeit in a different location. The 2 budding neighbors are in support of the application. The abutting cottages are reasonably well buffered with existing mature tree cover. The addition itself is located on the point of land in an inlet hidden from view from the neighbors. The addition is on the dock. There's no in-water works. I would also say that I believe it reflects the general nature and character of the area. So I'd say overall, given the design and site-specific circumstances, there would be negligible and the impact would be indiscernible, and that the built form would not dominate the shoreline. With respect to the request, Planning Committee recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown. If you could state your address and keep to the 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. 40 Holly Street, Suite 404, Toronto, M4 S3C3. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee, for allowing me to speak today. I'm in a bit of a different situation in this file where my history is I'm a zoning lawyer and practiced for 33 years, typically representing developers. Here I'm representing my wife on this file, so a bit of a different client and representing myself. And when we purchased the cottage in the late 2022 and closed in February, we looked at the boathouse, looked at the condition. We knew we had to replace the dock. We did further investigations with our engineers, and the steel has to be replaced and the like. And those permits were in place. And we also realized we had to replace the boathouse and looked at a design. Our original design, before I take you through our slides, had a rectangular face to it. We called, and I was involved in those calls to talk to a number of different planners. I never talked to Sam in that process, but Sam was good enough to chat with me after the fact when the report came out, and I called and I said, listen, we thought we did everything right. And I'll tell you why. We were dealing with a site that had 11% coverage. When we had our discussions, we were asked, make sure that the addition doesn't sit proud, so it doesn't sit in line with the edge of the boathouse. So we pulled it back 9 feet, which I'll show you. We also were asked, could you also give something back in terms of the coverage? So change the coverage in terms of the permitted garage, and the overall coverage on the site was 11. Can you just take it down to 10.9%? We said, okay. So we did that. And we proposed the design that's before you today, which we think is very modest. I retained local engineers. I retained a local planner, and I thought that would be the end of it. And if we had any concerns, that we might get a call saying, here's the concerns, and we didn't get any calls. And then we saw the report. So let me take you through our slideshow. We go to the next one. So just taking you to the site, just a couple of points here to make. This is the property here. This is the boathouse. There's other structures along the lake on that side. You know, the direct view here, actually are friends of us on the lake here who look directly into it.
The delegate needs to be closer to the mic.
And on the angle can look at it as well. So this is just to show you that in terms of direct views, what you would see, but we were asked fairly from staff, give me a canoe view. So if we go to the next slide just for a minute, and this is just showing you that it's tucked into sort of the corner. I'll speak while I'm at the mic. And
You could take the mic over.
oh, okay, I'm going to drop it if I do that. I know that. So it's tucked into the corner. It's well screened and landscaped. And I did what typically you should do is I met with my adjacent neighbors, showed them what we were going to do, both before we submitted, during, and then recently, just to say, here's where it's at. And they signed emails of support. Just so you know, when I saw the response yesterday from Ms. Brackley, who her cottage is off any of the maps, I called her and I told her, your letter talks about us adding a third slip. We're not adding a third slip. She said, oh, I didn't know that. I said, I can show you the slides to show you that. She goes, no, I believe you. And she said, I just typically like to talk about things when they're, you know, seeking zoning amendments. We've been here a long time. So she was quite nice, wished me good luck, said she wasn't going to be able to be here today. And I also told her we had a compromise that we were proposing in terms of the as of right dock width and depth that we hope will get this over the goal line. So if I go to the next slide. And again, this is showing you the cottage, which again was built by someone else, and the boathouse, which is on the left side there, and how it sits today. And then the next slide, please. And again, just showing you some of the structures that are along that part of the the point there on Lake Joseph. And the next slide. So here's the existing boathouse. And just to point out, it has the white and gray juxtaposition, which when you see what we're proposing, ours will be sort of dark along the entire thing, which will blend in a little more with both the backdrop and the water. And what you'll also see is they have that little structure on top of the roof and a bit of a more steep roof than what we're proposing. So in terms of view, what I'm going to say to you is that ours is virtually indiscernible in terms of change. And I think actually a better look in terms of how it fits in. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, you have just about 30 seconds left.
Okay, so that's the next slide. The next slide is side by each, if you can go, just to show you that, in my opinion, it's like a Tide commercial. I can't see the difference. There's not a big difference. And the next slide, giving just a different angle, and the next slide, and the next slide, side by each. I would say to you, and the final slide. We were asked, could you give something back even after we made those changes and brought it back 9 feet? And the answer is, there's my as of right dock. And if the request is do one other thing to push this over the goal line, we took a foot off the width of the dock, a foot off the depth of the dock.
I think you can wrap that up now.
And that's
Thank
what
you.
we're proposing if this can go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody anybody else wishing to speak in favor of this application? That you can sit down now, Mr. Brown, thanks. And do we have anybody in the queue for speaking against this application? All right, we have one person. Yeah. Ms. Brackley, if you could turn on your microphone and your video.
I believe they're both on.
Well, we saw you for a second there.
Whoops, there we go. Try again.
Very good. Thank you very much. State your address if you could, and you have 5 minutes.
No, I won't need 5 minutes. Janet Brackley, Unit 2, 1183 Hamels Point Road. I didn't intend to speak today, but because Mr. Brown referenced our phone call last night, I felt I had to. As I said to Mr. Brown, there's a lot of development that is coming and being redone on the small lots. And the bylaws, in our opinion, are often pushed and then pushed farther and pushed farther. And that's why we objected. Our biggest issue with Mr. Brown's development is not the fact that it doesn't look good or doesn't seem to fit the contour, is that it does exceed the bylaw width for a single-story boathouse on a small lot by 21%. And our feeling is that each time one of these zoning bylaws are passed, the next person comes along and wants more. And that's why we objected. We know he needs to redevelop the boathouse. We remember when it was new, and that was a long time ago. And that's all we have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I believe there's nobody else wishing to speak. Very well. Let me turn it over to committee for questions of the applicants or the delegates. I will call a question, and then we can have a discussion.
Rob, I just had one question.
Oh,
Sorry.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Mr. Sawyer, for you. You said that they were issued a building permit. I'm confused because I thought, unless I misunderstood what you said, what was that for?
Through Mr. Chair. The building permit that's been issued is for the dock. It's just for the dock reconstruction. And the dock is shown on the site plan, and they could proceed with just the dock reconstruction, but of course the boathouse is on top of that dock. So they've applied for their dock permit, and that's been issued, but now they're wanting to ensure that they can move forward with their boathouse plans as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So no change to the size.
Of the dock?
The permit is for a boathouse, for a new dock but the same size as it is in existence now.
No, actually, the dock that's proposed is larger than the dock that exists today. And the proposal is to extend the length and the width of the dock to the maximum that's permitted as of right. And it is shown on the site plan. I believe it's a dashed line that shows the proposed dock in comparison to the existing dock.
So I'm still
Councillor
confused.
Kent,
I'm still confused. How could there be a building permit issued if we're discussing that addition unless I'm misunderstanding it right now?
Mr. Sharp.
Chair Bosworth, and I'll try and maybe clarify. I believe what Mr. Soya is saying is the applicant have applied for a building permit for a dock. The dock hasn't been constructed yet, so construction hasn't started. So the existing dock is still there, but the dock that's shown on the site plan circulated with the public notice is the dock that they have approval for through a building permit. So it's constructed out to 66 feet in length, which is the maximum permitted length, and it's constructed utilizing the full permission of the width allowance under the zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I have two questions, if I could. Through you to Lanny. Sorry, Mr. Dennis, I guess, sorry. I unfortunately, I'm not able to connect to the internet at the moment. And I just wondered, I wonder if you have a picture of the proposed boathouse, the lower level. I'm interested in I don't have that, so I don't know who can put it up on the screen for me is what I'm.
And
Or whatever.
Alex, can we pull that up? Mr. Brown, no, we'll look at it on the line. We have to look at it online. Is that what you were looking for, Councillor Nishikawa?
Yes, and with that, no, sorry, that's a comment. I'll save that. I'll go on to my next question. Thank you for
Yep.
bringing this up.
Second question.
Staff have recommended denial. I'm wondering if we should be offering the applicant an opportunity to have a deferral as opposed to a denial.
Well, let me read the resolution perhaps, and then we can discuss it at that time. Are there any other questions from committee? Seeing none, let me call or read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend Township Council that zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 09/23 bylaw 2023-09 be approved. Discussion. Councillor Nishikawa is wondering whether there is any support around committee to have a discussion with the applicant, whether they would like a deferral. Councillor Mazin.
Perhaps the question should be asked of the applicant.
Yeah.
If they're interested in a deferral to work with staff. It sounded towards the end of the presentation.
They
by
did
the
offer.
applicant that there might be some opportunity in that area. So I think the request, I support, I guess, Councillor Nishikawa's thoughts.
Yeah. Councillor Kent.
And this may have been an earlier question is, could the applicant explain what that additional space that we now see so clear on here is being used for? It was, I thought the follow-up that Councillor Nishikawa has been, it's not on the plan, obviously.
Mr. Brown, if you want to answer that question, please.
So right now it's extremely tight in the boathouse now for storage for any of the boards and the kayaks and the like. There is no spot for them. So it's to have extra storage on the main floor. which shows in that area and sort of breathing room, so to speak. And in terms of the compromise request and, to go to council, to be honest, it was a shock to us, and we've already gone out to look at the contracts and the dock to get dock people up here to construct is a challenge, and we have that lined up and would like to proceed in September with the cottage. So if it goes to council without recommendation, what we had suggested as a compromise was to reduce the as of right dock width and depth and put that in the bylaw. Add an additional condition in addition to lowering our permitted coverage, also securing a reduced dock width and depth below what your as of right is as a condition of any approvals. And we put that forward in trying to cooperate.
Another question? Yes.
Follow up. What? The windows are those windows or doors along the two sides of that? Yes.
I'm going to do them as garage doors because I was told if I do them in as sliders,
So it
it's
opens fully.
it will open fully.
It's like a covered.
You're trying to get air in there, and I'm told garage doors are better because the other they say will ice over on the main floor with the water.
Thank you.
Any more discussion / questions? Councilor Ishikawa.
Thank you. I'm trying to be supportive of this application, but I'm very challenged with what I'm seeing. And I built a number of boathouses and designed a number of boathouses. And in fact, it's interesting, one of my smaller ones, I've seen the unique ways that people hang their kayaks, it's very, very interesting, but it doesn't need a huge amount of space. And I'm very, very concerned that there's a seating area planned for this lower level of the boathouse. And therefore, while I was hoping the applicant would take the opportunity to work with staff a little bit more, I couldn't support this application, and I would have to go with staff's recommendation of denial at this point.
Councilor Zavitz, and then Councilor Mazin.
Thank you. Through you, I think to that point, and I guess to staff, I don't believe staff is recommending that we deny this because of this additional living space. Am I correct in that? You're denying it on a number of, recommending denial on a number of, so through you.
Mr. Soya.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So staff have, I mean, it's been a difficult application for staff, but we're looking at this from a entire property perspective, and especially when there's a exemption for to exceed the maximum permitted lot coverage. That is typically what is done. And in this case, there's an existing legal non-complying boathouse that it's a 2-story boathouse that would typically only be permitted on a lot frontage of 300 feet. It also has a 2nd-story covered area that would typically only be permitted in combination with a sleeping cabin in the 2nd story on a lot with 400 feet of frontage. And the boathouse itself has a few minor other non-compliances in terms of 2nd-story boathouse width and length. And then also looking at the dwelling, which is setback, has a legal non-complying setback of 42 feet, I believe. And then a raised sun deck, which received approval for a reduced setback as well as part of that construction or former reconstruction of the dwelling. And then there is a garage that's being proposed. Committee may recall that there was a previous approval on this property for a larger garage and 11% lot coverage. Now that garage was never built. The new owner, Mr. Brown, is proposing to build a smaller garage, and it does seem like that would be quite well buffered, similar to the last garage that was proposed due to existing vegetation. And when there's lot coverage proposed, there's or an exemption proposed, the shoreline buffer is always an important factor. And in this case, the shoreline is quite well buffered. However, the depth of the buffer can't be the target depth of 50 feet can't be achieved in this case due to the dwelling and raised sun deck location. And the proposed boathouse addition cannot be buffered because of where it's located on the water. So the addition, so staff have looked at, realizing that an additional 3.7 feet width could be added to this boathouse as of right. And I believe it's 3.8 feet. And the additional 8.2 feet, on the one hand, when looked at just on its own, is maybe not that big of a number. However, taking everything into account on this property and the size of the property, staff have, that's where the recommendation from staff has come from. But we, as stated in our report, there are a number of ways that this could potentially be improved, and that's why we've also mentioned that committee may want to consider a deferral to provide the applicant with a bit of time to provide. Thanks.
Council, Mr. Sharp had a comment too as well, and then.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth. I just wanted to elaborate on a couple of key points. Just with respect to the exemptions that are in front of you, the first exemption is from lot coverage, and the second exemption is from cumulative width. Both of those controls in the zoning bylaw are the predominant means in which the township controls built form and density. And in this case, that built form and density is going to be directly situated in an open water environment where it's visible from the lake. So there's no way to buffer it, unlike a dwelling or a garage with vegetation. There's a couple of key points that I'd just make with respect to policy. The first is with respect to a policy in the official plan, which states that strict adherence to policies limiting density related to these factors is paramount. So like I said, I think that that's an important consideration that needs to be pointed out. Secondly, with respect to the redevelopment of non-complying buildings and structures, in the implementation section of our official plan, it states when redevelopment is proposed of a non-complying structure, every effort shall be made to comply with the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So in this case, we have a legal non-complying structure. Certainly, the applicant could replace it one for one. That's his right. But in this case, what's proposed is an addition to the single-story portion with relatively or no improvements. Although Mr. Brown has indicated that he'd be willing to reduce the width by a foot on the dock and reduce the length by a foot on the dock. As Mr. Soya had mentioned, this is somewhat of a difficult application. There are aspects, I think, that have some merit, and staff did leave the door open to work with us to try and bring the proposal into closer compliance with the zoning bylaw, whether that's a further reduction in the overall size of the dock. It hasn't been constructed yet, so perhaps there's some opportunity there. If committee is looking to go down that road, perhaps some direction could be provided to staff about what it is that you'd be looking to achieve in order to gain your support for this. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Mazin.
Yes, thank you. I have some.
And then Councillor Roberts, sorry.
As well. And I think Councillor Nishikawa was right. I think this should be deferred if the applicant would. I'd hate to turn it down. I think there's some give and take here, but I'd not be supporting it. I could be supporting staff at this time and that, but hopefully it'll be deferred.
Councillor Mazin, then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. And through you, I appreciated the staff's further comment on that, because a question here isn't the dock. The dock is up right as to what they're building. They've already had a permit. The question at Mark really is that first level of the boathouse. And I'm trying to look at the numbers And it would seem that that is a 12-foot interior space, which if it's it's 8 feet out of compliance, that's really the space we're talking about, correct? That is out of compliance at this point.
That's correct. So essentially, the width is over what's permitted and the lot coverage is over what's permitted.
Great. And the width, just for clarity, is the first level of that boathouse. It's not the dock. It's not the second story.
That is
it's
correct.
That first story.
Yeah.
So if I was to, support the deferral, I think I'm not as concerned about a dock that's in compliance. I'm concerned and support staff's concern that in this particular property, it's that first level of the boathouse that, could require some further refinement. So if that's a specific enough direction.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I echo everything that went before. I supported deferral, and I think the applicant should be asked that question again.
Any other questions or comments from committee? I would like to make one comment. I thank both Mr. Bryce and Mr. Sawyer for their clarifications because they are very important, particularly the wording in our official plan. And personally, I would support if you want to make his boathouse 1 or 2 feet wider, that he has the right to do. I would support that, but anything wider, I personally wouldn't support. So let me turn it over to the owner. Would you prefer deferral?
The deferral is ensuring that we at least get final decision one way or the other in August. I think, is that your next council meeting? Will it go to council without recommendations?
It depends. I'd ask Mr. Sharp whether he can make that kind of turnaround.
Through you. So I think it would perhaps, I can perhaps look to Mr. Pink to confirm this, but basically the heavy lifting is intended to be done at planning committee. So if planning committee defers this, we would bring it back. We could certainly bring it back to planning committee in August, which would extend the ratification of planning committee's recommendation to council in September. But there may be an opportunity to move this along to council. And in the interim, staff could aim to work with Mr. Brown to come up with something that's more amenable and bring it to council next month. But I would perhaps look to Mr. Pink just to provide any clarity.
If it goes to council next month, then
Mr. Brown will let Mr. Pink reply first.
Thank you, through you. I think as Mr. Sharp pointed out, typically the discussions, the debate would occur at planning committee, and we would typically defer and bring any changes to the application back to this body. However, if council or committee feels comfortable moving it forward, we can attempt to have those discussions between committee and council and have that debate at a council meeting next month if you wish. Again, not our typical process, but it is possible. I get the sense the applicant is eager and willing to work with us. So I don't sense there'd be a time delay. It would be more a question of whether you wish to have that type of debate at a council meeting as opposed to this committee where it really should occur.
Mr. Pink, do we have challenges with if the changes between committee and council aren't minor in nature?
I suppose technically that could be an issue. However, I get the sense that obviously any changes to the application would be further improvements. So I don't think we would necessitate a further recirculation.
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
if they were adding to the proposal, we would then contemplate whether neighbors needed to be notified of changes, but I think we're going in the opposite direction. So that should not be an issue.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm recalling a couple of concerns over the last few months about notification and different things from members of the public that participated in the first meeting and thought we were it was going to come back to planning. And in fact, we rushed it through because everybody's eager to get it done. I don't want to, I believe that it needs to come back to this committee.
Very well. So I think we will have a deferral and
is that taking me to September?
yes.
I prefer no deferral. I prefer you make a decision.
Anybody? Counselor Edwards?
In this case, and we have done it years ago, that we have taken the things to council. If there is a desire to make a change and make it better, I would let it come to council at that time. I don't see a problem with it. If it's still not what we want, we can turn it down at that time. And that, but I would say that over the years, when we used to have council after all these meetings, we have moved stuff, and I think Mr. Pink would remember that. Thank you.
Our CA would like a word.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think Councillor Edwards makes a good point. I mean, if the recommendation is denial and the applicant wants to work with staff, this is something that could be pulled from the minutes and voted on separately if there's changes which satisfy council at that point in time. Thank you.
So to be clear, we would deny now, but it could come back to council with improvements, and council could then make a call. Is that the process? Councillor Edwards?
You said deny now. No, I didn't say that. I said we.
No, but that's what he
set this
said.
aside.
That's what
And
Mr.
that
Hammond
means
said.
we'd adjourn this and then bring it back to council.
Without recommendations.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Again, I really want to be, one of our challenges is that we're trying to do heavy lifting at the council table, when in fact it should be around the planning table. And there is a reason for that. And I think that if we keep carrying on this way, we will be at our meetings until 8 o'clock at night. And it's not just about that timing, but I would say other applications, and we've had many, that we have ongoing conversations through planning meetings. We don't rush them through to council. So I understand what the applicant's trying to achieve. But there's a lot more to this application than that could be modified at council, in my opinion.
Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. And through you, I'm concerned that, we have a pretty well-established process that we rely on regularly and seems to work all the time because we follow the process. When we start trying to accommodate these kinds of changes is when we start getting ourselves in over our heads and dealing with things at an inappropriate time. So the other thing is, and maybe this is, maybe it's only me, I'm sensitive to the fact that we seem to be somewhat apologetic for strictly interpreting and enforcing our own official plan and the terms of our bylaws. And we needn't be. They are clear, they are established, they are there for a reason. They were developed in a pretty intense way with lots of deliberation and lots of input. And we should only rarely consider stepping outside of the scope. Obviously, we have to have latitude to make it bigger. We needn't apologize if we can't find a way. I can't find a way to support this today. In the normal course, there would be meetings with planners, and we would come back next month or whenever it's ready to this same committee, and it would be dealt with in the normal process, in the normal fashion, with input from everybody that we count on to help us make good decisions.
Thank you very much. Let me ask the applicant one more time if you would like a deferral or not.
Again, if it goes to August, great. If it's into September, I'm listening to the comments, I'm going to be honest, that have been made today about, taking it in and that I'm asking for more coverage. I'm asking for less coverage. I have 11% today. And if the thought is, take off 3 or 4 feet from the base of the extension, I'm going to be honest with you. It's not something that we're prepared to do. I don't think it has impact. And I was prepared to bring the dock in because that was a suggestion to me. On the side, I was prepared to bring it in. I was prepared to bring in the depth. We did everything right. And I'm totally shocked that I'm in this position now. I've done this many times with applications. I was originally thought I'd be going through a committee of adjustment for a 3.5% variance to width. I'm not increasing the coverage. I'm decreasing it. They had a previous approval with a previous owner to 11%. So all this discussion that I'm doing something that offends the policy of the official plan, I'm not doing that. And I'm well versed with official plan policy. I sit on the province's housing task force for affordable housing. I know policy. And
Thank you very much.
I'm saying to you, I came forward with a compromise even after I pulled the building back. So if you say to me,
Mr.
bring
Brown,
it in 6 feet more.
I really just had a question for you, not.
No, if
I
it goes to,
think-
if
I
it
think
goes to
what you
August
said-
council and we have that time to submit something to, what I would recommend in my respectful request is send it without recommendations to council and give me a chance between now and council to resolve it with you guys. It's not that much in terms of resolution. There's no notice issues
Right. Well,
because I'm
fine.
going to go
So
less.
I think what you're saying, then you'd like it to, we'll call the vote, and whatever the vote says, we'll go forward to council. And
That's
we'll
what
do
I'd like.
between here and council.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Correct.
I've called the vote. All those in favor? All those against? Defeated. Yes. Yeah. Good. Yes,
Just a quick comment on process. When we're reading the resolutions and when things are in the affirmative, can we just, and just for clarity, before we raise our hands, to be sure that everybody.
I can do that.
Thank you.
So our next case, sorry, Councilor Edwards.
So this will be coming directly to council. We can, and it will be voted on at that time. So if there was changes, we could still accommodate those changes. Is that right, Mr. Pink?
Mr. Pink?
That's correct. All recommendations from this committee would proceed to council in August, and there can be a debate during that bylaw, and staff can certainly relay any changes or any, amendment to the application that occurred between now and then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right, next case is number 3, ZBA 15/23 bylaw 2023-047, and Ms. Walker has the podium.
Thank you, Chair Bosenworth. The next application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 15/23 bylaw 2023-047 in the name of 2871503 Ontario Incorporated. The subject property is known municipally as number 2 Island Skye M35. I would direct committee's attention to the site plan on page 99 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. The applicant proposes to enlarge one of the 2 existing dwellings on the property, dwelling number 1. The township zoning bylaw does not permit an increase in floor area for a dwelling where more than one dwelling exists on a property. Notice of this public meeting under the Planning Act was circulated 23 days in advance, and 4 submissions have been received to date. The comments are summarized as follows. Comments have been received from Nick Snyder, the township's chief building official, Tim Sopko, the township's public works technician, and Curtis Savret, planner for the district of Muskoka. A letter of objection has also been received from the neighboring property owners, Brian Courtney, Adam McMullen, and Eleanor Dawson. These submissions were circulated to committee prior to today's meeting, and I am happy to read any submission in full at the request of committee. I prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 15/23 bylaw 2023-047 be approved. I have no further comments, but I'm happy to assist committee with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. I believe the applicant's agent is Mr. Allen. If we could bring him in.
Good morning, Chair Bosworth.
Good morning,
members of the committee.
Bosenworth,
Sorry.
that is. And it's 5 minutes, Mr. Allen.
I appreciate that. If my presentation could be queued up. I'm the planner representing the applicant. The property is held in a numbered company, but it is under the ownership of Waleed Solomon, who is here today as well on this call. Next slide, please. Subject property is the eastern half of Skye Island, or Isle of Skye, on Lake Muskoka, which is just off the point of Mortimer's Point at the end of Heather Lodge Road. Next slide, please. As Ms. Walker mentioned, there's one proposal to amend the bylaw today, which is to increase the floor area of a dwelling on a lot that contains more than one dwelling. Next slide, please. This is a site plan of the property. Mr. Solomon purchased the property in 2021 and has made some extensive improvements to the property since that time, including the removal of a number of existing sheds, as well as the conversion of some sleeping cabins that weren't permitted to be sleeping cabins, as well as the removal of a sleeping cabin that was not permitted. There are two dwellings on the property. Dwelling number one is at the north end of the property, approximately 1,000 square feet, and dwelling number two towards the southern end of the property. The proposed addition will connect an existing work shed, which you see labeled in yellow, to the existing dwelling number two. And if we move to the next slide, please. Here's a closer view of the proposed additions. There is a kitchen addition at the rear and side of the existing dwelling. The work shed is going to be joined to the existing dwelling through a connection. There'll be two bedrooms located within the work shed. The green connection is simply additional living space and hallway connections. And then there is a 525-foot screened room off the front of the proposed addition. In total, the additions add about 1,500 square feet of additional building area to the property and 2,203 square feet of new habitable area. The difference between the two is that the work shed is existing. And you'll also note that over 500 square feet of that new habitable space is screened room. The sleeping cabin that's existing today has recently been reduced by 73 square feet, which is well below the 650 square foot max. Next slide, please. This property does have a lot of history. Here's a very interesting photo from 1953 that shows what seems to be a canoe party on the dock. This property has a lot of heritage. It was one of the first developed in the area. Next slide, please. A look at the property today, the existing dock and the dwelling behind that's to be expanded. This is where the canoe party was happening in 1953. Next slide, please. The front of the existing dwelling. Since Mr. Solomon purchased this property, extensive renovations, upgrades, and repairs have happened to every building on the property, restoring it back to its glory days. Next slide, please. This is the location of the work shed and the dwelling to the right. The addition and connection will join the two buildings together. Next slide. This is the location of the screened room that will project in front of the addition. You'll see that there are no trees to be removed in that location. Next slide, please. Part of the complications of owning an old building is old mechanical and access. Currently, there is all the mechanicals are underneath the building in a crawl space. So there is a proposed addition to the side and rear of the building to create a mechanical room. It will be physically connected, but it won't be accessed from the interior of the dwelling. So it doesn't count towards habitable space. Next slide, please. The shoreline of the property is very well buffered in the location of the proposed addition. You can see the existing dwelling here pointed out and the location of the proposed addition. The vegetative shoreline buffer provides exceptional screening to the additional built form. Next slide, please. In terms of site improvements, Mr. Solomon has made some tremendous improvements to this property, including replacing a failed septic system that was undersized and draining to the lake with a new modern system that is well back from the water. And in particular, an island property had difficulty, it appears, removing garbage and waste from the site. So when Mr. Solomon acquired this property, there was an exceptional amount of garbage, including asbestos and construction waste.
You have about half a minute left.
I can confirm that all of this material has been removed, contaminated soils have been restored, and every building has been upgraded. I should note that the Heather Lodge Association has reviewed this and no objections were recorded at their annual general meeting. Last slide, please. In terms of overall planning analysis, the lot has exceptional amount of area and frontage and could be severed in two with the potential of having over 16,000 square feet of habitable space on the lot. The proposed amount is less than 750 square feet, which you would see in one dwelling. And that would include the sleeping cabin that would be located on the lot. The additions are 75 feet back from the shoreline. The majority of the new building area is more than 100 feet back from the shoreline, with an excellent shoreline buffer that provides great screening. Those are all my
Mr.
comments. I recommend, I would hope that planning committee can accept this application and approve it as recommended by staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the picture from 1953. That's a nice addition to your report. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in favor of this application? Is that Mr. Solomon?
I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you. I don't want to take any more of your time. Mr. Allen has made the full presentation, but I'm very grateful for your time and hope to have your support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in favor of this application willing to speak? And is there anybody in opposition? If you could come up, introduce yourself with your address, and you have 5 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Brian Courtney. My address is 8217 at 2075 Bayview Avenue, Toronto, Ontario. I'm a member of the family in the immediately adjacent property. I'd like to start by clearly stating my comments are not in any way meant to be personal or vindictive. We would like the owners to be able to improve the property for the enjoyment of their family, but are presenting opposition to the application in the interest of our family's enjoyment. And we want to ensure that any work permitted is within the constraints of the bylaws and the official plan. This is our first and only opportunity to influence the application being considered to date. We have several concerns with respect to the proposed development and the details of the information that was submitted as part of the application, in particular with Schedule 2. Our high-level desire is to halt any development related to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and seek alternative development plans in cooperation with the applicant and the planning department. We have had a presence on the island for over 100 years. We are familiar with the developments that have taken place over that time, and we've been diligent over the years to preserve a natural form over built form on our half, and greatly value several aspects of the property that are congruent with the official plan that relates to waterfront and island properties. Specifically, we value the low density, natural form, and modest development of structures along the shorelines, along with the preservation of vegetative buffer and other measures that protect privacy and provide noise attenuation. The subject property underwent a similar zoning bylaw amendment in 2006, namely 2006-123, to build an addition on the north side of dwelling number 1. In around 2009, a permit was issued to build the work shed that was shown. And this building was something that resulted in some deforestation and loss of privacy between our lots, our swimming dock, which is immediately in front of the proposed main addition. And there were 2 large propane tanks also installed within our immediate site from our primary dwelling. The degradation of enjoyment is further amplified by the fact that our old dwelling is not insulated, that a number of our bedrooms are indeed covered screened porches or porches with thin construction, and that we spend a significant amount of our time on our outdoor main patio deck. We can readily hear the neighbors converse and play ping pong, which is in and of itself acceptable. However, the properties in the past had much more unruly neighbors and renters, and we are fully reliant on appropriate buffers from loss of privacy and noise. We had horrific experiences with several renters under the prior ownership. The proposed addition and other development on Lot 2 will increase the activity adjacent to where we have generally sought to enjoy the natural and relaxing aspects of the Muskoka environment. When we learned of the permission to build the woodshed in 2009, we were assured by the owners in the township that the workshed would not be habitable. It is now being used as habitable space, serving as an example of the erosion of the limits of use that occur when development is allowed. Other examples that we are concerned about include the potential that the dwelling number 2 on Lot 2 may in fact be 2 separate dwellings under a single roof, and that sleeping cabin number 1 and shed number 4 are conjoined under a single roof, raising the possibility that these structures combined exceed the size and use restrictions of a shed or a sleeping cabin. We have several concerns about the details in Schedule 2, all subject to discussion and confirmation. The accuracy of Schedule 2 is important because it's presented to you for your consideration, and it also will be a permanent record in the township's records. Schedule 2 includes reference to an existing sports court where there has not been a sports court in the past based on both our own direct knowledge of the property and in prior zoning bylaw amendments 2006-123 where such is not shown at that point. The deck attached to dwelling number 2 has been expanded in the past year and appears to be approaching double the size of what existed previously prior to the current owners beginning their improvements, while also moving its edge closer to the high water mark. The distances cited in Schedule 2 between dwelling number 2 and the deck to the near high water mark appear to be significantly greater than both our own estimation and what was cited in prior zoning bylaw amendment 2006-123, even though dwelling number 2 has not been moved and the deck has grown in size. In contrast to Schedule 2 drawing, we believe that the main docks, which are legal non-complying in front of the property, extend well beyond the 66-foot offset shown in the drawing from the high water mark by an additional 10 to 25 feet. And we would like that to be verified and corrected if necessary. Shed number 4 in both Schedule 2 and the planner's report shares a common roof. Previously, it was only 106 square feet. Now it's over 200. It appears as though these two buildings could potentially be joined and used together.
You have 30 seconds left.
Yep. And finally, the analysis from, there are a number of other issues where I think additional parts of the zoning bylaw amendment might need to be included in the amendment. I believe detailed that in the letter. And finally, the analysis relies on a hypothetical but unrealized severance of lot 2. The minimum size of lots in our area is 300 to 400 feet of lot frontage and 2 acres. But reliance is being made on the lot of record criteria, minimum lot of record criteria. And we think that this is providing the benefits of a lot severance without actually having undergone an application, review, and consent for severance. And it's important that we consider foreseeable avenues by which the building could use by either the current or future owners or renters, and assessing the impact on us. And enforcement after the fact of things such as what's habitable, what's not, is very difficult, not practical, nor desirable. We would like to hear the court.
You can wrap it up.
Thank you very much. That's it.
Great. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Very well. Committee, do we have any questions? Councillor Davids.
Thank you, and through you, and I suppose to staff. As I look at the deck here and the report, figures 4 and figure 6, I guess just a question to staff, whoever that is. Are you satisfied all building permits are in place for all activity that we're seeing in the photographs?
Ms. Walker?
So there is a building permit for the workshop that currently exists on the property, but it's not permitted to be habitable at all. It's permitted to be a workshop only. I cannot confirm if a building permit has been issued for that ramp that connects the two buildings. I don't see a building permit on file for that. The dwelling addition has a building permit from when it was originally approved. Is there any other particular structures in that photo?
So there's no bylaw activity on the property
Not
whatsoever?
currently, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kent, then Councillor Burry.
I guess this is an example where I find that the letter is very helpful, that raises a whole bunch of issues. And am I wrong to say that our staff have not had time to review the comments in here to see if they're actually true? I'm assuming they are true, in which case there's some things and issues that we probably need to have dealt with. I'm just wondering about the timing of this letter we just got handed in.
Ms. Walker?
We've had a chance to review the letter, but not necessarily follow up on every single aspect of the letter. It was submitted just a few days ago. I believe it was circulated to everyone on committee when we circulated comments. I would say the letter doesn't necessarily raise any issues with the current proposal in front of us. So if there's separate bylaw issues that need to be addressed, we could follow up with that separately, but it really is up to committee how you want to proceed.
Supplemental,
Yeah,
Councillor
the
Kent.
only question I had is the issues I thought were raised, that there was a bunch of work that was done without permits to expand some buildings. And I don't have all the details because he went through it very quickly.
I can speak to the existing sleeping cabin that has a shed not connected but adjacent to it. The walls are currently shared, but I did check on site that there is no interior access between those two buildings. So the one half is used as a shed as of now. There is some interior improvements being made, and the other side is used as a sleeping cabin. So there's been no expansion to that sleeping cabin area that we're aware of at this time.
Mr. Sharp, and then Mr. Burry, Councillor Burry.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. I think there's questions about work that may or may not have been undertaken on that property. I think there's likely no better person to ask than the applicant himself or the applicant's agent who can speak to the specifics of the property and those details. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burry.
Thank you, Chair Bolsworth, and through you, question to planning staff. Did we verify the site plan sketches that were provided by the applicant's planner to ensure there were no oversights?
Through you.
Ms.
We
Walker.
don't require a survey to be submitted with applications, so we do take what is submitted as being accurate. There would be an option for committee to request a survey be completed, or maybe Mr. Allen can speak to if a survey was recently completed on the property.
Mr. Sharp.
Thank you. Further to Ms. Walker's response, I would just note that when an application is submitted, it's required to be commissioned by a commissioner of oaths, and it's on that basis, staff are understanding that everything that's indicated in an application or on a site plan is true to form and accurate. Thank you.
Councillor Mazin.
Question thank you, and through you. A question for staff on the side yard setback. I heard concerns just about the buffer. I just wanted to confirm. I was trying to read through the report again.
Through you, the required side yard setback or rear yard setback in this case would be 15 feet on the property. The existing work shed is currently 37.7 feet from that rear lot line.
And just confirming, sorry, supplementary, just
Yep.
confirming that 15 feet is within compliance. That is a normal side yard setback, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Trying to figure out how to, if we're adding more habitable space, did we take into consideration, because this is a large amount of habitable space to add, did we take in consideration the docking, the parking, all of that is involved in this particular application? I'm trying to sort that through, and I didn't see any notice of that information, but that's one question I have. Thank you.
Ms. Walker.
Through you, if you're referring to mainland access, the owners do have a waterfront landing that is just across the kind of narrow channel.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Sorry, just thank you. I want to just address there's a lot of concerns that the last speaker brought up that I have concerns about, that I really want a little more time to read this. So I hope actually we can have a break before the vote. But ultimately, I'm asking the question really about the sports park court. In the picture, it looked like a gravel kind of thing. I am very, very concerned that if we approve this as written today, that in fact, this graveled area could then be hard packed. I have a lot of concerns about that because I don't think it would fit in with what we consider in our bylaws of a sports court. Again, that proximity, first of all, the proximity to the neighbor. So, we already have heard pickleball is incredibly loud if you are a neighbor of it. I'm just saying, but I do have concerns about the runoff of the water. So I'm a little concerned that we would be approving this and then somebody will come along and hardscape it, and that would be having more.
Ms. Walker, if you could comment on that question.
So the owner and agent may be able to provide more background in terms of the sports court. Our understanding when speaking with the owner and applicant is there was a previously existing sports court on the property. I would note the township doesn't have any records of this just because it's an old property and we're not sure when it was originally in place. I do know the owner explained that it hasn't been kept over the past few years by previous owners. The gravel area is currently being used to store materials for construction on the property. But again, the owner might be able to provide a bit more comment on that.
Mr. Ryan, if perhaps you could provide some commentary on the questions from the letter, plus the questions surrounding the sports court.
Sure. Through you, I think the letter covered a lot of ground, but maybe I'll start with the matter of the sports court. There was a survey completed of the property, numerous surveys of the property by IBW surveyors, and the sports court was identified on those surveys. Subsequently, Waleed had the opportunity to tour me of the property and explain that there was a previous court in this location. However, it was also used as a garbage dump. And as a result of that, there was a tremendous amount of contamination. So the entire area was rehabilitated by removing that soil. So that's why you'll see some gravel surface there today. If Mr. Solomon would like to provide some additional information about the history of the court, and he's here today to do so.
Yeah, just very quickly, it was a
Go ahead, Mr. Solomon.
It was a flat space that my understanding from two previous owners who I've spoken with was it was intended to be used as a sports court. Unfortunately, as Mr. Allen has pointed out, it was used as a garbage dump for several decades. We removed and remediated hundreds of pounds of asbestos from there, as well as a barge load of old construction material. We've remediated the soil. We have flattened it. We have actually tried to precisely, in fact, we have markers in there to precisely set out where our friends at Colson Brothers identified the original flatland, in fact, was. And our intention, of course, is not to move from there. And I will tell you, in terms of water runoff, we have spent a ton of money and time and energy ensuring that every bit of soil here is remediated properly, that there is proper water runoff in every bit of the property while maintaining its original heritage. And I've provided a couple of photos that I had shown to Caitlin. The city came by twice, by the way. But I provided a couple of photos that I was able to dig up from previous owners that demonstrated where this was.
There was a question that whether this you have plans to hard surface this sports court, and what kind of sports court it will be. Our plan at some point, we've got a lot of stuff going on here. Our plan at some point is to do some kind of basketball. There is my hope. A small basketball, put up a small basketball net there is my eventual plan. And so not pickleball. Not right. No, not pickleball.
It's not hardscape is what I want to hear.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's
no. We'd use the plastic. There's plastic tiling that you put that is the more environmentally friendly approach that you'd use here for a basketball court that allows for proper runoff.
And just from
so we're not paving it or anything like that. Absolutely not.
For my edification, how long ago was it that this?
I didn't hear you. Please, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair.
How long ago was it last used as a sports court?
Probably several decades ago. It was overgrown, Mr. Chair, and it was used as a dump. Like the amount of stuff that we removed from there was pretty amazing.
Are there any other questions from committee? Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I just have a question through you to David. Does the use had not been continued for decades? Does he then have the right to have that space as sport? Because we have different bylaws now for sports
Director Pink.
Thank you, and through you. Obviously, legal non-conforming uses can be a complicated animal, and ultimately it may be up to a court to determine. However, my understanding has always been you need to demonstrate obviously a continuous use, or at least an intention to continuous use. And I have to admit, hearing the owner confirm that it was used as for a different use for several decades would imply to me that use no longer is grandfathered in that sense. Would be my opinion, but again, it's not technically up to necessarily myself or department to confirm. It can be a complicated situation, but several decades we would typically not then issue a building permit, for example, for a foundation to be turned into a dwelling after several decades of lack of use.
Any other questions from committee? Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you for indulging me. There is just a lot on this for me in particular. The applicant mentioned heritage. I had it written down as my number one thing that I wanted to raise, but I'm a little bit cautious. Do we have this on a registry now? And would the applicant be interested or allow us to register this as a heritage property?
Ms. Walker or Mr. Sharp, do you know, or can you find out if it's what its status is on the heritage?
Yeah, it currently isn't designated as a heritage property. So no, it isn't designated.
No, we have a registry.
It's not on the registry list either. Yeah, sorry.
Very well.
I will tell you, Councillor, we have, I mean, we've gone as far as literally getting the exact same length, color match, everything to maintain the exact heritage of it. I don't know what the implications are of registering it as such. I don't want to speak to that, but I haven't put in all this money to come back to you guys and take it down and build like a modern monstrosity. We really do want to keep the beauty of this. And I got a lot of friends on the lake who, when I bought it, said to me, "Don't you dare take it down." And I've been trying to take that as seriously as I can.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, through you. So we have had occasion on Lake Muskoka many times to go by the property on our way to Port Carling and back. Listen, yeah, it's obvious that someone has taken it over, and it's obvious that someone is putting a lot of love and care. So this is me not being impartial. I did certainly notice as we drove by a number of times the construction.
Councillor Zavitz, did you have a question?
No, I'm just really supporting the fact that.
Well, you could do that after we call
Okay,
the motion. Thank you very much. Councillor Mazin.
Question, and thank you, and through you, for staff. And then going back to the sports court. Where is that located? I've got the site plan up and I'm trying to remind myself, quite honestly. At what point do where is this located on the island? How far back would it be from the buffer? It's on an island. Is this type of thing?
Ms. Walker, Mr. Sharp.
I understand the actual measurements. Thank you.
Ms. Walker.
I believe we can bring it up on the screen so everyone can see
If
the
you
site
can, yeah.
plan. But it is located, it's dashed on the site plan. It's located just behind that second dwelling number 2. It's greater than 66 feet back, but I would note the entire lot is within 200 feet of the water.
Right.
I don't know if that helps provide any clarity for you.
Well, it's supplemental, if I may.
Yes.
So I think you're answering my question. Nowhere on this island would it comply with, I think, our new site plan alteration. Is that what I'm trying? Isn't it 200 feet? I'm confirming what I think I believe.
Who's Mr. Pink?
Sure, thank you, through you. I believe the question is, yes, the zoning bylaw was recently updated to require sport courts a minimum of 200 feet back. I don't have my scale out in front of me, but just looking quickly at the site plan, it doesn't appear this property has a depth greater than 200 feet to accommodate a new sport court in compliance with today's requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Sharp, do you have any further comments?
Sorry, I was just going to point out where the sports court is located, if that would be helpful, but I can go ahead and do that if you
Yeah,
want.
why don't you do that?
Okay.
Just for, we can all be sure. Just point to it. It's on there for us.
Site plan is identified with that dash line.
Councillor Kent.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. When this owner is done with this property, we have 3 large sleeping quarters on a 500-foot strip of land. Am I wrong? Dwelling 1, dwelling 2, which is now a sleeping cabin, but it's got a deck and it's got an attachment. So it's big. And then a very expanded house. So 3, what is the coverage again? It doesn't. On a
Ms. Walker?
500 square foot, 2-acre piece of property.
So just to clarify, dwelling number 2 is still a dwelling. So I want to make that clarification. So it'll have 2 dwellings as it does today and 1 sleeping cabin. The lot coverage is going to be 8%, so it's permitted to be 10% on this property. Was there another part to that question that I
But
haven't answered?
we're making existing non-conforming properties bigger.
That's correct. It would expand the existing dwelling, which doesn't comply under the bylaw. Part of the reason staff looked at this is there is a severance potential on this property because there is the ability to divide two existing habitable uses. So they could potentially sever the property to divide the two existing dwellings. They would only need to meet the minimum lot criteria, which is 100 feet of frontage and 15,000 square feet to do so. And then they would be permitted to have 7,500 square foot dwelling on each property, provided that it complied with the coverage and setbacks.
I don't understand that. How can you have a 100-foot lot on a severance? And that's maybe.
Mr. Sharp, perhaps you can answer that.
Thank you, Chair Bosworth. Yes, it can be quite a difficult policy to understand, but as you know, in the township, there's quite strong policy with respect to the number of habitable buildings that are permitted on a waterfront residential lot, one dwelling and one sleeping cabin. As you are aware, and this is one of the situations, there are numerous situations in the township, numerous properties that have a legal non-complying situation where there may be more than one dwelling or more than one sleeping cabin. There's been long-standing policies in the township's official plan that identify that where those situations exist, you can actually apply to sever the properties and gain exceptions from minimum lot requirements down to as little as 100 feet of lot frontage and 15,000 square feet of lot area in order to bring those properties into closer compliance. In other words, the result of that type of severance would be to have one dwelling and one sleeping cabin per property. So that's just one consideration that staff have given. The other consideration is that on a singular lot, the zoning bylaw would allow one dwelling up to a maximum habitable floor area of 7,500 square feet, plus a 650 square foot sleeping cabin. And the overall habitable floor area on the property with the proposed additions would be less than what that total amount would equate to. So again, that's one reason that staff could support the application.
Director Pink can respond to that further. It might help.
Thank you, Chair.
Explain for Councillor Ken.
I think I sense there's likely some concern amongst the committee, hearing that you could potentially subdivide properties to that small size. And rest assured, the existing policies and official plans still require quite stringent lot requirements, 200, 300, 400 feet, 500 in the new OP and several acres. Although it might sound alarming to allow it down to 100 feet, 15,000, keep in mind that's only when it's demonstrated that you have two legal habitable buildings. So if you're creating a new lot and you have the more stringent standards, you are gaining development rights because you're creating a new vacant property. So an additional residence, an additional septic system. This only comes into play, the policy that we're referring to, when you have two legal buildings. So in essence, all you're doing is putting a line on a piece of paper to separate those two legal dwellings. You're not gaining the permission for an additional dwelling or an additional servicing system. There are two legal habitable buildings on this property, been that way, I believe, for decades. A severance of the two would just simply, for title purposes, separate them, but you wouldn't have the permission to build a new dwelling as you would, again, on a typical severance. So there are, with that said, some expansion rights, was Mr. Sharp was going over in so doing. But again, I just wanted to dispel any concern that, such a policy would, some sort of loophole or could be rampant overdevelopment.
One more supplemental, Councillor Ken.
I don't, why if he did sever it down the road, he then has the ability to sell a 100-foot lot to somebody else, which is how we get into, at least under one ownership, I feel a little more comfortable with it. Could we not restrict his ability to sever the property? Well, if we give him permission to put all these non-conforming structures on it.
Director Pink.
Thank you. It has come up from time to time during these discussions, during planning applications. You could, through this process, through the bylaw, recognize the frontage and area and adding an additional hurdle of planning application in order to subdivide. However, keep in mind your official plan envisions one dwelling per lot. So it sort of encourages the separation of multiple family compounds into individual lots with one dwelling on each. So it runs a little counter, you know, to your own official plan if you're looking to prevent, again, one dwelling per lot. This is a legal, but a non-conforming situation of multiple dwellings on one property wouldn't be allowed today. So the policy, you know, allows owners to then put those individual dwellings on individual lots as the official plan visions. So in a roundabout way, yes, you can attempt to prevent that future severance, but it does run a little counter to your own policies.
Director Pink, could you address the concern around the committee on how we might move forward handling the sports court?
Thank you. Through you. As I said, legal non-conforming situation is really challenging, and this is the dilemma here. You could, through this again process in the bylaws, stipulate that a sports court is not permitted. However, if it's demonstrated that that sports court has in fact existed and has continuously been used or intended to be continuously used, your zoning bylaw is irrelevant. It's moot. They have that right to continue that regardless of what you put in the bylaw. So what I'm getting at is it's really somewhat of an enforcement issue. If we see that a sports court is built, it would be, the onus would be on the municipality to prove that the sport court was in fact not continuously used or not there. And hence our challenges with enforcement in these situations. It then becomes a legal situation of us, the municipality, trying to demonstrate with evidence. And I think we have some good evidence today that it wasn't used for several decades. However, there may be very good evidence that there was an intention to continuously use that sport court over those several decades. It was just an interim dump. Somewhat unusual, but these are the things the courts would opine on. We're just a party to that process. I would really, to be honest with you, look to the applicant and the agent as to their, you know, willingness and future plans for that sport.
That was my next question to the applicant.
Could I just make it maybe a bit easier for you, if I can? It's Waleed here.
Yeah.
I like, you know, as I think one of the counselors stated, we're trying to be good citizens. We really are. We've put in a ton to make this beautiful, and we're so proud of the heritage we're maintaining here. I'm happy to agree that we won't sever it. And in fact, I can tell you, one of the ways I was sold this place, and the plans are here in the house, was that you could sever it. I don't think it would be fair for you guys to give me approvals for what I'm looking for today, and then to have somebody 10 years from now come and sever it, and you have all these structures, some of which are grandfathered, and you're trying to go through this kind of process. So I'm happy to agree to it not being severed. Forgive me, Ryan, if I'm not supposed to. But like
Mr. Solomon, I don't think there's a lot of concern around the committee on that. There is some concern about that you will have a sports court, and there's clearly some doubt about whether you even have a right to have a sports court. Would you be willing to tell us that you will not put a sports court in?
I'll tell you, Mr. Chair, and the folks in the planning department came and saw this. There is no question there was a continued intended use there. You see the gravel there. The gravel is there because we cleaned it. So to just leave it as it is would not be the use that I think was intended there and that I was hoping for. I am happy to commit to it not being pickleball if that's what it is. It is very small. I think Ryan can give you the dimensions. It's very small as it is right now. It's not intended to be a tennis court. It's small, and I can also commit that it's not going to be paved in order to ensure that it's done properly. But I was sold this property on that basis, and I'm hoping that I will be able to offer my children some enjoyment in that way as it was sold to me.
I presume there are no more questions, but I'm wrong. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. The area of the sports court right now, what is the square footage of it? That's one thing. Secondly, you've done a very good job on the heritage. So would you be interested in having it designated as a heritage? I believe there's some tax breaks and everything else like that staff can explain to you if you wanted to go that route. And if it was on title that it could not be severed, I would support it. Thank you.
I'll get Ryan to
Ms.
answer the
Walker,
question on this.
Sorry, Mr. Solomon. Ms. Walker, if you can answer the question about the square footage on the sports court.
Unfortunately, I don't have that number. Mr. Allen may have that.
Mr. Allen, would you have the question on the square footage of the sports court?
Thank you. Through you, it's approximately 1,200 square feet in area.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to assume for the second time that there are no more questions, and I'm going to call the moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Township Council that zoning bylaw amendment ZBA-15/23 bylaw 2023-47 be approved. Is there any debate on this? Mayor Kelly.
Thank you, and through you. My questions were already asked, so I didn't have anything to say till now, but thank you for allowing me. I just a couple of quick thoughts. We see ample evidence of truly excellent stewardship of a property that I'm not familiar with it historically, but I can tell you it looks to me like it's steeped in Muskoka tradition. There are obvious opportunities from a purely financial perspective to do probably more financially with that property. And we've now heard Mr. Solomon suggest that he's willing to be bound to not sever. However, that can be accomplished. There's some issue of the sports court. I certainly understand Director Pink's comments that kind of an interruption in the intention to use might trip up the grandfathered rights. I don't know how to answer that. I don't think any of us do. I do think we need to figure out how to resolve that. But in the interim, in the meantime, if we can secure some agreement that it not be hard packed or paved, that it be available for use in something less loud than I understand pickleball to be, I'm comfortable with that. And the last issue that I heard, and I think I heard it cleared up, was a question about location of structures vis-a-vis the neighbors. There is the neighbor delivered up a pretty comprehensive list and letter. Unfortunately, none of us have had a chance to do much with it, but I did hear that setbacks have been respected, that there's nothing sort of undue or obvious, immediately obvious that contravenes any of the rights the neighbor might have. This, to me, is completely in line with the type of stewardship that I wish we could see across the lakes. And so with the additional offer to restrict subdivision, I'm quite comfortable with this application.
Councillor Zavitz, I cut you off earlier when in question period, but you had some comments you wanted to make about this property. Are you happy with that? Councillor Nishikawa?
Thank you. I would also support this application. However, I would ask if staff could confirm the information that we've given today when it comes back, however the vote goes. If it comes back to council, I would like just confirmation about some of these measurements and different things that we've been given. I do have concerns about 1,200 square feet. I don't know how to deal with that other than that the applicant I trust, and I believe every applicant that comes forward until they prove wrong. So I would just say that the applicant is saying that he's going to do whatever permittable. I understand you need a place to play, and you're on an island, you need a place to play, that type of thing. I understand that. I would also be remiss as a person of heritage and have sat on this heritage committee for many, many years at this township, if I don't acknowledge or request staff to work with the applicant and finding out or not finding out. And my request would be if we could get this on the register and then follow through with all of what comes beyond that, but at least get it on the register. And I'm not suggesting that this particular applicant may do something. In fact, he's proven to be the complete opposite. But should the property be put up for sale 5 years from now or whatever, I would like it to be on the register when somebody else was going to come and do something. So thank you.
There's an opportunity for you, Mr. Solomon.
I'm happy to learn more about that and consider it. And it was never my intention to pave it ever. I will be using a permeable, it's plastic with little squares that they use. So it'll be permeable, and you can record that.
Mr. Pink.
Thank you, through you. Just so committee is aware, and I think this came up a bit during the budget discussion and other discussions. Keep in mind recent changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. If we place the property on the registry, that protection will disappear in 2 years after the registry. So really, I think what the owner and Mr. Allen should put their mind to is, would they be willing to actually designate the property? That would be the permanent protection. The registry is a great current tool, but that has been somewhat gutted by the current provincial legislative changes. So that's just something for the applicant to think about.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. I would just follow up to say that I would support the proposal with the severance condition in there, which I think is a great addition. But I would like to see them come back with some clarity on some parameters around a 1,200 square foot, that's almost a tennis court, sports court. I think we should come back and know what it's going to be, how big it's going to be, what it's going to be made of. Because if you read this letter, it was never there for the neighbor, maybe 30 years ago or 50 years ago. But I would say that by that point, you've sort of grandfathered it out of existence rather than into existence. So I'd like to see what that's going to be, rather than have it come back as a problem and a complaint later as a way bigger, even if it's done with proper plastic squares. I know exactly what he's talking about.
Thank you. Any more discussion on this item? Because I'm going to call the vote.
Just, do we need to amend it, David?
Okay.
Well, I guess if I can, I hear a lot of sort of requests between now and council, things to clarify, things to look into, heritage, sport court sizes, et cetera, severance. I don't know if committee wants to solidify those in the actual resolution, because it's just simply saying you're approving. So I think if you want to send very clear direction to the applicant and her staff as to what has to be done 1 month from now, I think this is your opportunity to do that. I think right now we're just sort of all batting around ideas, but nothing is.
Councillor Mazin. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pink.
Just my comment would be, I'm satisfied that staff have done their due diligence on this particular application. I was satisfied by the response in the side yard setback. That was my biggest concern listening to the person who had complaints, is the impact of the use of that property on their enjoyment of their property, and to ensure that is extended to the that sport court, whether it was there or not, is up for debate. If it's on the record, to have it as a permeable space and ensure that that use with respect to the neighbor noise can be mitigated if the appropriate buffers are in place, then I'd be satisfied with that moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you.
Last comment.
A lot of
Can't be the
concern.
last comment.
Sorry,
Thank you.
and then Mr. Roberts. Yeah, Councillor Roberts.
There's been a lot of concerns, and I truly appreciate your letter. And there's a lot of great detail here. But I also recognize that we're dealing with a property that has been established for many years. I am wondering, or I would not be in favor of putting any restrictions on saying that you cannot sever, because I think that would create some issue going forward. And I guess mostly I'm just not quite sure that we need to add anything to this resolution. I think staff have already confirmed that everything's here, so I just don't want to muddy the waters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last comment from Gord Roberts, and then I'm cutting it off.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm supportive of everything that the mayor said, and more importantly, I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Edwards.
I just a question to Mr. Pink. If the owner would enter it on title, that it wouldn't be severed. And that if he was willing to, that wouldn't cause a problem, and that it would be, if he wants to protect that land, that would do it, would it not, Mr. Pink?
Mr. Pink.
Thank you. That could be a potential tool. However, the challenge, I guess, is the authority to require some sort of agreement on title through the process we have in front of us. It's unfortunate site plan control has been removed. That could be used as an avenue, but we no longer have that available to us. And through the zoning process, unlike committee of adjustments through a minor variance, there's no authority to just require an agreement registered on title. You need some authority for it to then be registered on title. Again, we can perhaps hope that by the time this comes to council, the province will have reinstituted site plan control and council can have that discussion. But for now, somewhat of a challenge as to the tool to make that happen.
All right, I'm calling the vote. I've read the resolution. Would anybody like me to read it again? Very well. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried. We will take a break and come back at is 11 o'clock okay, or is everybody like 5 after? 5 after. Thank you very much. We'll be back at 5 after 11.
Thank you, committee. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Call this meeting back to order at 11:06. Our next application is Zeneli ZBA 16/23 bylaw 2023-059. And again, we have Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Bosemore. The next application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 16/23 bylaw 2023-059 and 9 in the name of Zeneli. The subject property does not have a specifically assigned address. I would direct committee's attention to the submitted site plan beginning on page 127 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. Bylaw 2023-059 is to rezone part of the subject land from rural RU2 and rural scenic corridor RU2-S to environmental protection EP1 in order to fulfill the condition of consent application B/145/21 ML. Notice of this public meeting under the Planning Act was circulated 23 days in advance and 3 submissions have been received to date. Comments have been received from Nick Snyder, the Township's Chief Building Official, Tim Sopko, the Township Public Works Technician, and Curtis Everett, Planner for the District of Muskoka. These submissions were circulated to committee prior to today's meeting, and I'm happy to read any submission in full at the request of committee. I prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 16/23 bylaw 2023-059 Zeneli be approved. I have no other comments, but I'm happy to assist with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have the applicant's agent?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yes, my name is Amy Powell. Thank you for having me at this morning's meeting.
Thank you, Amy. Could you give us your address as well?
Sure. I live in Unit A at 202 8th Avenue in New Tecumseth.
Please continue. You've got 5 minutes.
So I did provide a presentation to staff. If staff's able to please share the presentation as I walk through the slides. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members, members of the public and staff in attendance. My name is Amy Powell and I'm a registered professional planner as well as the Chief Planning Officer for Powell Planning and Associates, the planning consultant acting on behalf of the Zeneli family for the lands in accordance with roll number 6-18-005-01 that are subject to the application ZBA 1623, an application which is seeking a zoning bylaw amendment to expand existing environmental protection lands in accordance with the condition of consent under file number B14121ML, passed by the Township's Committee of Adjustment in the spring of 2022. Mr. Mario Zeneli is in attendance as well this morning and happy and able to address any questions that I may not be able to answer. Next slide, please. So this morning's presentation will consist of a brief walkthrough of the file. During my presentation, I'll be speaking to the file's history, providing a description of the site's location, as well as its existing state, describing the existing official plan and zoning that's applicable to the subject site, as well as describing the development that we're here today before the committee to discuss, and concluding with a summary of how the application represents good planning, accordance with the provincial, district-wide, and local level policies as to how growth of this nature and scale is appropriate within the context of the subject lands. Next slide, please. So in the spring of 2021, we undertook the pre-consultation process with township staff to determine the requirements.
Ms. Powell,
yes,
I'm going to stop you there. Because you looks like you have a lot to say and you've already burned up about 1.5 minutes of which or 2 minutes. So I'm going to let you have a little bit more. But she has 5. I'm just suggesting that if anything that was in the report you don't want to repeat because you're going to burn up your time. So I would just say be mindful that you want to get to your conclusion and I'll start to keep the clock going from starting now.
my presentation is about 4 minutes and 20 seconds, so I'd respectfully like to continue. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did undertake Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. So we undertook our pre-consultation in the spring of 2021. Staff had noted at the time that we do some research with regards to if any existing consents had been historically created on the lands. We then were able to move forward in December of 2021 with an application to committee where an environmental impact study was a requirement of a complete consent application. That application received a decision in April of 2022, where there was a condition of consent, which included the ask that's before the committee today, which is to expand the environmental protection lands as a result of the environmental impact study that was completed by Riverstone. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the subject site. So the lands are located off of Frank Miller Memorial Route, Muskoka Road 169, which is east of Medora Lake Road. In the central west area of the township, the site size is approximately 23.6 acres. It's generally flat in its terrain and has approximately 628 meters of frontage on Muskoka Road 169. The lands are currently vacant with tree cover with the presence of a protected wetland, and that resides on the northern portion of the site. Next slide, please. The township's official plan designates the subject lands as rural as well as waterfront area and lake greater than 8 hectares, where alongside the District of Muskoka's official plan, low density residential uses are permitted that maintain the character as well as respect natural heritage features on site, such as wetlands, mature vegetation and landscapes, which are all present on this site. The township zoning bylaw, the use and ask here before committee today, the application also coincides with the zoning bylaw, which zones the land as rural RU2 as well as scenic corridor RU2-S and EP1 as presented by township staff. Next slide, please. So the proposed development, as previously mentioned and alluded to, through the conditionally approved consent, we are here before the committee to enact or to move forward and fulfill one of the conditions of consent. We're looking to divide the property to a 17.63 acre parcel and then the resulting 6 acre parcel. So the zoning bylaws subject lands are the 17.63 acre parcel, where again, we're looking to add 100 feet of the wetland buffer to the northern portion of the site, expanding the environmental protection area. Next slide, please. So in accordance with the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, as well as the District of Muskoka's official plan, the Township of Muskoka Lakes official plan, and as well as the zoning bylaw and environmental impact study recommendations from Riverstone Environmental, the proposed development really does align with all provincial, regional, and lower tier uses, as well as policy direction. We're looking to expand to better protect an existing water feature on site. Overall, as a registered professional planner, I do believe that this application represents good planning. We're in a position where we're able to make better use of an underutilized land and to protect an existing natural heritage feature. I thank the committee for your consideration this morning. Happy to address and discuss any questions as necessary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak in support of this application? And is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Does the applicant want to add anything? No, thank you. And there's nobody in opposition? Very well. Open to committee for questions. Let me read the resolution then. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Mayor Kelly. Be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Township Council that zoning bylaw amendment ZBA-16/23 bylaw 23059 be approved. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Sorry, Councillor Roberts, can you clarify whether you were in favor or opposed?
Sorry, quick trigger. I approve.
Thank you. Carried.
Thank you to the committee and to staff. Thank you very much.
Next case is bylaw 17/23, bylaw 2023-075. And it is Mr. Sawyer.
I believe the mic's now on. Thank you, Chair Bosenworth. So the next application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 1723 in the name of Molyneux. I would direct committee's attention to the sketch on page 170 of the agenda package. In 2021, consent was granted to provisionally approve severance applications B99 and B100, 21 ML. At that time, a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment was passed to require the retained lot to have a minimum lot frontage of 468 feet. In order to fulfill the conditions of consent, the applicant recently had a survey completed to determine the exact lot boundaries, and this survey revealed that the lot frontage of the retained lot is slightly less than anticipated, specifically being 7 feet less than the minimum that had been established through the previous approval. Therefore, the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to permit the retained lot to have a lot frontage of 461 feet instead of 468 feet. Notice of the public meeting was circulated 20 days in advance of today's meeting in accordance with the Planning Act. And the District of Muskoka, the Township's Development Services, and the Township's Public Works staff have all advised they have no concerns or comments, and there have not been any submissions from members of the public. Staff have prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration and have recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment application be approved. I have no further comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Is the applicant agent wishing to speak? Mr. Fauner. Good morning, Mr. Fauner.
Yes, good morning. Hope everybody's staying dry. Thank you, Chair Bosenworth and members of Planning Committee. Stephen Fauner, Northern Vision Planning Limited, 109 Meadow Heights Drive, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L1A4. I'm here this morning representing Patrick and Samantha Molyneux in this particular application. And as Sam had mentioned, it was subject to a previous application for consent that was approved. Unfortunately, when we got the survey back, we're a little bit short on frontage in the middle lot, but we still were well in excess of 400 feet. So I'm hoping that this will be more or less a technical matter, but you never know. So if I could just have my presentation queued up, that would be great. And I would like to thank Sam for his positive report and input on this matter. Thank you. So we could just move to the next slide. That would be great. And again, we're a little bit short. The zoning bylaw does require 468 feet of frontage in the retained lot, and the survey that's been done by Coot Hiley Jemmett showing 461. The other two lots do comply with the with 2021-118. Next. So this is the severance sketch that was submitted. I'll just note some of the staff had some pictures regarding a new boathouse and dock. Actually, it's the dock that's been finished. And that is right in front of the dwelling. And you can see the position of the old boathouse that has now been taken down. And again, we are talking about the middle lot in this case. And you can see from this diagram that the frontage on the middle lot is actually in excess of the other two lots. Next.
What's happening here?
And this is the draft survey. Part 2 is the subject lot in this case. Next. And this is just a close-up of that lot. Next. Okay, am I back again?
Yes.
Thank you. The next slide shows the actual frontage. The way it's measured in the zoning bylaw is 140.5 meters. Next. And this is the existing dwelling with the old boathouse in the background. These pictures were taken in the fall of 2020. Next. And just a bit of a close-up. The boathouse, the new one, is actually going to be in the foreground on the left portion of the picture. Next. 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 And that's the dwelling on the subject lot. Next. So again, the proposal, even though the lot, we are short of frontage on the amending bylaw, we certainly, it exceeds the official plan requirements, and it also exceeds the proposed requirement in the updated official plan of 120 meters or 394 feet. We did have an environmental report from Beacon Environmental. Next. Again, the requirement's 468 feet and we have 461. The retained lot does have the existing development on the property. Next. And if at the time of the application we'd applied for 461 feet instead of 468, I would think that we probably would have got approval still on that basis. And the shortfall of almost 7 feet is really not perceptible from the water. According to staff, the new dock and proposed boathouse comply with the zoning bylaw, even taking into account the slight frontage shortfall. Next. So in conclusions, I won't go through the points. The one point I will make is that the retained lot, it is compatible with lots in the vicinity. In fact, all of the lots are. So anyways, I'm hoping that planning committee will see their way to an approval, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your fulsome presentation. Mr. Fauner, do we have anybody else in speaking in favor of this application? Would the applicant like to say a few words?
Hi, group. I think Stephen's done a great job, and I'm not sure what we can add beyond kind of the presentation, everything else, and all our plans remain the same. And there's some background noise, so I apologize. But yeah, we're looking forward to kind of bringing the property back and continuing on in our path over the next probably 10 years. So it's pretty slow building, but we have no major plans or et cetera beyond the boathouse for this time period.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody speaking in opposition? Nobody in opposition. Do we have any staff from committee, or sorry, any questions from committee? Seeing none. Let me read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Zavitz. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, I suppose, to Mr. Fauner, as I look at figure 4 of the, and I know this isn't exactly why we're here today, but when I look at figure 4, which is the under construction large dock and of course boathouse superstructure, steel structure, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 boat slips to the left side as I face, as I face to the water. On the right side, clearly there's quite a structure proposed there, which is on the water level. Now, we've had a number of files today, and of course, over the days, weeks, months, years, on this very same thing. Can I ask what is contemplated there in that space once completely and filled in? If I'm even allowed to ask that question within the context.
It's actually not part of the application, and
I understand that.
As far as I know, that Ms. Walker, they have building permits for that? Oh, sorry, Mr. Sawyer. Seen a lot of you both today.
Thank you. Yeah, they do have, there's building permits that have been issued for the dock, and then also a building permit has been issued for the proposed 2-story boathouse.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sharp.
Just to further elaborate, given that those permits have been issued and they relate to shoreline structures that are developed in accordance with frontage requirements, staff have reviewed those building permits to make sure that the buildings that were approved would continue to apply with the proposed lot frontage requirements. So I just make that
thank you.
Clarity. Thank you.
Can't remember if I read this. No.
No, you started to.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right, now I will try to read this. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Planning Committee recommended Township Council that zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 17/22 bylaw 2023-75 be approved. Any discussion or debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Carried.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Next item on our report is, or on our list is a report from our bylaw officer enforcement, Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning, committee. This is our bylaw enforcement biannual report for the first 6 months of the year of 2023. Just wanted to highlight a few things in this report. First and foremost, actually, I did notice a typo on the bottom of the first page. It's not 153 files, but as you see in the table, it's 148. So just wanted to point that out. And I will say that as of today, July 13th, we are now up to 172 files in the first 13 days of July. So as the report indicates, our most busiest months are July and August, and that's certainly keeping in line with what our file count is at now. As we see in the table, the number one item, if you group them all together, is obviously the site alteration and tree conservation issues. Number two would follow with zoning. And then number three would be property standards, and then tied at number four would be dog control and dark sky issues for this year. One thing to highlight in regards to parking tickets, and one of the reasons why we don't have as many as previous years, is back in the month of May, the District of Muskoka passed a new parking bylaw for this township. Unfortunately, the way it was written, it repealed the old bylaw and made the new bylaw contingent on the set fine approval, which has not been done yet. So we are not able to do any parking enforcement on any district roads within the township until that set fine approval has been done. I did send an email yesterday hoping for an update and hoping for those approvals to come through so we can start doing enforcement on district road once again. Another thing in regards to our part 3 information and summons for charges going to court, we have seen quite a big difficulty over the past year in regards to absences of justice of the peace during the other agency days. So we have had, in 3 of the 5 court dates that we've had so far, we have had a justice not show up or has been absent for one way or the other. So unfortunately, in that situation, everything does get put over to a different date. Some of those dates have now gone into September, October, November of this year. So we are seeing some delays in some of our court matters. We are hoping that it doesn't continue and we can get those court matters resolved. The only other thing I wanted to highlight in regards to the short-term rental public education and engagement, as everybody knows, we have an Engage Muskoka Lakes dedicated webpage right now for short-term rentals, and coming tomorrow afternoon from 3 to 5, we will be having our first public open house session virtually, and people are still able to sign up for that. I believe we have just short of 100 people have signed up, so that's a decent turnout. And we will be having an in-person public open house next Tuesday at the Port Darling Community Center from 3 to 5 p.m. So if anybody is listening and they wish to come, you are more than welcome to on either the Friday afternoon tomorrow or Tuesday afternoon on July 18th. Other than that, there's nothing else that I need to add, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Zabit's had a hand up first, then Councillor Burry.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Kennedy. Of the quantum increase in files since to July 1st, how many of those are related to short-term rental?
I don't believe any within the 13 days of July have been related to SCR properties.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Burry.
Thank you. And I have two questions through you. So great report. Part of public education is in seeing the reports. So what are we going to do to make this, I know it's public because it's here, but what are we going to do? What kind of communications plan to let people know that we actually do have some bylaw enforcement going on and that we're out there, that the number of cases are increasing, that, you know, this is I think an opportunity, because this is fact, an opportunity to get some kinds of things out there, media releases, social media, letting the lake associations know. They all have good distribution lists. We can get to the vast majority of our constituents through several of those forms. And I'm wondering what the plan is to do that.
Through the chair, excuse me. In regards to that, as it was presented yesterday by our communication specialist, we have started the Dark Sky communication project. So that is one of the main things that myself and Kayleen have worked on over the last couple months. We do have dedicated web pages that we've updated recently for site alteration and tree conservation. And obviously we do have a dedicated web page for bylaw enforcement. We've increased our staff, I guess, hours in regards to the summer months. So we work from the regular 8:15 start time, but go till 6 p.m. Through the week. And we are working every weekend in the summertime from 9 to 5. So that is increased. That has been increased in the last couple of seasons as well, since additional enforcement staff has been hired. And we're just moving forward. Myself and the communication specialist are continually working on improving our communication efforts to get some more educational material out there to the public. And to speak in regards to the lake associations, we are talking to the lake associations quite regularly now in regards to anything that we're bringing forward to the public.
Yeah, that's great news. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. The second piece is an offer. I was actually shocked to find out that the bylaw that we passed at district negated yours. So what can I do to help you with the district to get that complete and utter oversight fixed?
Through the chair, frankly, I don't believe there is much that can happen other than district staff will simply have to submit their their set fine application to the Ministry of Attorney General. And usually, at least what I've seen in the recent past, those do come back within a week or two. So I'm just hoping that they have been able to send that in and are hopefully be able to get those set fine approvals. From that point, we will have to order new ticket books because all of the things are updated, which will probably take another couple of weeks to get printed and whatnot to get to us. And then from that point on, we'll be able to start enforcing the district parking bylaw once again.
Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. My question was along the same with Guy. I'm a little confused about moving this forward. And I think what I just heard was a different layer other than just getting, so, I've had these conversations with MECP as well that they're saying, we need to approach them to get approval to start ticketing outside their parks or in those issues. And so I'm a little confused about where we're at and where we're going and not, or all of the in-between stages. And I feel very challenged as a district councillor that I cannot be part of improving this situation. So I'm not sure how this got so complicated is what I guess I'm going at.
Do you have any comments on that, Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
How
Through
is
the
this
chair,
process working through the district causing us such complications, I think is what your question is.
Through the chair, just for clarification, all of the chiefs and supervisors of the district municipality met with a member of district staff in regards to updating the parking bylaws. We gave some recommendations and they moved forward, I believe, with 5 separate bylaws, one for each district municipality. The issue or oversight, or however you want to call it, was within the new bylaws, they repealed I think it's 1987 district parking bylaw. And then below that, they made it contingent on passing for the set fine approvals. So there is now a gap where the district doesn't essentially have a parking bylaw until those set fine approvals are given through the Ministry of Attorney General. So I have reviewed the bylaw, and I did note to district staff that there are a couple minor typos in regards to section numbers. So they will have to amend those. I don't know if that has to go back to district council to do something like that. I'm not aware of what their process is in regards to that. But it may have to go back to district council to get that amended. And then a set fine application, which frankly, I've actually done one just this morning, and sent that off to the Ministry of Attorney General. Like I said, it only takes about a week or two to get your response back and your approval, so long as there are no issues on their end. And then from that point forward, we order our tickets and on we go.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to the Chief Bylaw Officer. In the report, it says that over the first 6 months been awarded $100,000 of penalties. Of that amount, a total of $30,000 approximately has been paid. My question to you or anyone else on staff, what can the township do to increase the fine payment speed or whatever? Would it be possible to engage, I guess, a contractor? This would go to David Pink, Director Pink, to focus on fine pavements, because I would think that it would be beneficial and for us to do that.
Mr. Kennedy.
Through the chair, I think I can speak to that. That is out of our control, unfortunately. When we charge people and we are awarded penalties within the provincial court system, the penalties are paid directly through the provincial court. So we essentially have no say on how quick it's paid. When they go through resolutions, they are given up to, they can go even over a year to pay their full fine. It really depends on what's said during the court case and what's said during the resolution. But their minimum payment time is 15 days. But usually, if it's a significant amount, they do give 6 months, 9 months to a year to pay that. So that is one of the reasons why you only see about a third that's been paid so far. I can note that in talking to the Provincial Offences Office, we haven't got our Q3 payment slips back yet, but from what I understand, 2 of the people that were convicted early this year have paid their fines in full, and I believe one was about $18,000, and the other one was in the ballpark of about $25,000 to $30,000. So you can add that to the $100,000, and you get pretty close to what we were awarded. But there are certainly downsides to the provincial court system in that respect, just because we don't have any control to make people pay quicker. So that will be the beauty of the administrative monetary penalty system, because we will have full control to make sure that people are paid on time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. One is, do you know how much fines we still have owing to us, and on average, how old are they?
Through the chair, no, I don't. That may go back honestly decades. So I would have to contact PO. I am not stretching that by any means.
That's part of the answer, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm not stretching that by any means, but there are some fines that have been unpaid for a very, very long time. From what I understand, the provincial court system does at a certain time, if it's high enough of a penalty, they will actually start going through a collections agency to get that money paid. But that does take quite a bit of time before they just pull that trigger.
And a second question, bridging off Councillor Burry's question. The part of setting the tone in our township and making our constituents aware of our activities, could we start, or what would be your thoughts about reporting the actual numbers making them know like as an indicator of your activity level and some indication about the fines. When I hear an $18,000 fine going out, that perks me up and, you know, says, oh, that's great. These are significant penalties. We're not talking $200, $300, $400. And that kind of information in the public realm with our constituents would, you know, give them, you know, hope that, or give them understanding that we can be very effective with our enforcement regime. Thoughts on that?
Through the chair, typically I've never really seen municipalities broadcast how much they get in fine amounts. That would be something that we would be one of the first to do if we ever did do something like that. So I
think a good idea.
If that's the route that council wishes to take. In the past, we did do a couple of media releases in regards to the situation on Sugarloaf Island. Obviously, no fine amounts were issued at that point, but we are hopefully close to gaining some resolutions in regards to that matter and finally having that closed. But again, you will regularly see sometimes, you know, police will broadcast, hey, we've stopped a whole bunch of drunk drivers, or this person has been charged and convicted and received this type of penalty. But in my experience, I haven't seen municipalities go down that road at this point.
Fair enough. Any other questions from committee? Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. Excellent report and well received.
Yeah.
All right, we have some unfinished business. And this is zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 58/22 bylaw 2022-193. And Ms. Walker is going to tell us about this one.
Thank you, Chair Bosenworth. The next application to be heard is zoning bylaw amendment ZBA-58/22 bylaw 2022-193 as amended, in the name of the Anthony Miller Trust and the Karen Miller Trust. The subject property does not have a civic address. I direct committee's attention to the submitted site plan and drawings beginning on page 195 of the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the application is summarized as follows. In 1999, council approved zoning bylaw amendment ZBA/49/99, bylaw 1999-97, restricted land-based buildings and structures to a specified building and development envelope and limited the maximum floor area of a dwelling to 2,152 square feet. The current proposal will reestablish a new building/development envelope and will remove the restriction on dwelling size. The bylaw also originally proposed a hold zone so that studies could be completed to address deer wintering and wildland fire risk. The application was originally heard by Planning Committee at the March 16th, 2023 meeting and was deferred to provide the applicants the opportunity to complete a scoped environmental impact study and wildland fire risk assessment and to work with the concerned neighbors and their agent to attempt to address their concerns. And there was concerns from the neighbors directly to the east. The applicants have now submitted a scoped environmental impact study and wildland fire risk assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions. The applicants have also addressed the concerns of the immediate neighbors to the east, who have officially withdrawn their objection subject to an increased side yard setback of 25 feet and prohibiting habitable structures and building envelope B. These changes have been made on the updated site plan that's attached to the agenda package today. After the March meeting, a submission was received from Steve Fauner, the agent for Leslie White and Ed Cass, neighbors to the east. The submission states that his clients are willing to withdraw their objections to the above noted application, provided the habitable buildings are not permitted to be located in building envelope B, and the minimum side yard setback for building envelope B is 25 feet. I'm happy to read that submission in full at the requested committee. I prepared a detailed planning report for committee's consideration. Staff have recommended that zoning bylaw amendment applications ZBA 58/22, bylaw 2022-193, the Anthony Miller Trust and the Karen Miller Trust be approved, subject to the following minor amendments. First, to prohibit habitable buildings within building envelope B. Second, to require a 25-foot side yard setback from the northeasterly side lot line. And third, to remove subsection 1 I 1, 2, and 3 from bylaw 2022-193, which imposed a holding symbol on the property. I have no further comments, but I'm happy to assist committee with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from committee? I will read the resolution then. Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Chair Bosemsworth. I just wanted to reference Ms. Walker's excellent summary. I don't have any additional comments to make other than we were able to work with the neighbors and come to an agreement with the restriction on habitable space and an increased side yard setback. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Right. Now, questions from committee. Seeing none, I will read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved, the Planning Committee recommended Township Council that zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 58/22, bylaw 2022-193 be approved, subject to the following minor amendments: to prohibit habitable buildings within building envelope. B, to require a 25-foot side yard setback from the northeasterly side lot line, and to remove subsections 1.I.2I and 3I from bylaw 2022-193, which impose a holding bracket H symbol. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we have, we can move on here. We have now some new business, and we have a report from the Director of Services, Developmental Service and Environmental Sustainability on the GIS pilot project. Mr. Pink.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report is in your agenda packages on page 260. As committee will likely recall, we entered into a pilot project last year with the district to enhance our online mapping due to some concerns in the past. I think you will also recall a number of presentations where Mr. Jake Knowles came and presented some what I think are great additional mapping layers and features with respect to building permits, minor variances, ongoing planning activity. I provided a few links to those additional layers in your report if you care to review those. And again, I'd encourage all to circulate word of it as it spreads in the community. I think they're learning of the great additional tools at their fingertips. However, unfortunately, we were recently advised that, as is not, I guess, entirely unexpected or uncommon with contract positions, that that they have secured alternative employment. And just given the lateness in the year and the breadth of work, really would not make much sense to try to fill the position for the remaining contract. So it is essentially an assessment report as to the success of the pilot project. And I think I can comfortably say it was successful. We worked very well with the district. They have the expertise, they have the hardware. We had the ideas, and we had an excellent individual to fill the role, and I think created a lot of great mapping for us. Unfortunate as it was to end a little early, we got a lot of good work done and tried to make sure that it was set up in such a way that there was not an extensive administrative burden on existing staff to continue to maintain it. So I hope we can continue with it. And I should note just very briefly that there is the potential, of course, to extend the program. I think from a development services, there's still a few maps that could be contemplated, but nothing I would say overly critical. But I do know other areas, emergency services, public works, feel that they can create a number of maps for several years. So something to consider in the upcoming budget, whether you wish to extend the pilot project. And with that, available for any questions.
Questions from committee? I see Mr. Roberts had his hand up earlier.
Thank you. I believe Director Pink answered my question, and I would think that if we really see the value in what's missed and more, that we should, he and his department should bring back, submit that requirement to the 2024 budget. Thank you.
Councillor Mazza.
I was going to say the same thing. I support that concept. We can make that decision at budget, but I think that a lot of people who have started to use this have seen the value in it thus far. So thank you.
Noted.
We need a resolution for that.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. We now have a delegation from Mr. Pollard on feeding wildlife bylaw. Is he in the queue?
Yeah. So I think Mr. Pollard may have been here earlier. There was a gentleman in the back and I wondered if it was him. Sorry. And I guess I know he runs a very small business on his own and he just, I'm assuming couldn't continue to wait. I don't know. There was a presentation attached. I have spoken with him myself, but
Director Pink?
yeah.
So I could just quickly back to the last item. It may be beneficial if staff could prepare a resolution just to solidify if the intention is to have the a la carte item in the budget. And perhaps during that break, we can see if we can track down Mr. Pollard. So if I could suggest a short break and we can take care of both.
All right, we will take a necessary break of 5 to 7 minutes. And we'll be back at, a little after 12. Turn to our, we could return to our seats, please. Mr. Pink had suggested that we should have a resolution to direct staff to return on the topic of the GIS mapping. So we have a resolution.
It's coming from the CAO.
It's coming from the CAO here, so. Moved by Mayor Kelly, directed by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that the Director of Development Services, Environmental Sustainability is hereby directed to prepare and include business case in the 2024 operating budget for a continuation of the contract GIS position for council's consideration. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, Mr. Pollard. Where's he going? 10 minutes? 5 minutes. Thank you very much. If you could come up and make your delegation to council, and you have 5 minutes, and start with your address, please.
My name is Rick Pollard and I live at 37 Todd Home Drive, Fort Carling, POB 1JO. I have a pretty much a common sense bylaw proposal. I've lived in Port Carling for 9 years as a full-time resident. In that time, there's been people feeding foxes hot dogs all winter, and 16 deer migrating and hanging out people's backyards, which is fine and dandy, but it affects all of us. So when I looked into it, there wasn't a bylaw for feeding wildlife, which I thought was strange because I was always taught never to feed wildlife my whole life. And so that's what I have today for you. So we might as well go one more. Yeah, so to sum it up, my proposal is to create and implement a bylaw to address the feeding and luring of wildlife inside the town of Port Carling. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. Feeding wildlife affects everyone, regardless of your intentions. You know, a lot of good intending people, but the reality is most of the yards in town are not fenced. It's unreasonable to expect wildlife to see lot lines. I think we all understand that. So one person has the ability to affect all the neighbors. One guy in the middle of the community bringing in 16 deer, all those deer are eating all their privacy trees and all their flowers and whatnot. Unfortunately, common sense doesn't prevail in all situations. And currently having no bylaw just leaves a gray zone, and there's no guidance for people to, you know, understand their impacts. It's quite common for cities and towns. Toronto has one. The town of Welland, Perry Sound, they all have bylaw feeding or feeding bylaws. Apologize. Go ahead. Putting feed out for deer will also track foxes and bears, raccoons, coyotes. I had a skunk in my backyard the other Sunday night, and it got my dog a little spray. So that was a nice little surprise. But for example, feeding deer may seem like a nice, well-intended action, but it also increases the likelihood of bears and other critters coming around. It's, you know, food is food, whether you're a deer or a bear. Corn is all enticing. We have a large tourist population, and some of the newer residences are coming from Toronto and that sort of thing. And down there, I guess they didn't learn, you know. Squirrel. Sorry? Squirrel. Yeah, yeah. So I just going through our information that we have online, I didn't see anything that addresses this at all as well. It's just to let the community know, like, you know, some of the do's and don'ts. I'm going to the next slide. Whoops. So we go one more slide. Why it's not good to feed wildlife. They can become dependent on artificial food. So if you're feeding it corn all year long, and then one neighbor said, oh, I stop in April. But the problem with that is that's right when there's the least amount of food. And there's research to show that they can't just quickly change back to eating essentially twigs and that sort of thing. It's kind of the worst time for them to be stopped feeding the food you've been feeding them. So it's shown that some of those deer actually will die because of malnutrition. Suddenly they've gone from being fed and suddenly their stomach can't digest what their natural food is. They can also lose their natural fear of humans and pets, and just causes conflict. Also, wildlife may gather in large numbers when they're being fed. This can be detrimental. It can help diseases spread, and also cause like destruction to the natural habitat, all that sort of thing.
Mr. Pollard, you are coming up to about half-minute left.
All right, thank you. Obviously, we don't want anyone to hit a deer. Obviously, a lot of damage, a lot of deer hits, especially recently. I've noticed a bunch, and feeding them near roads and that sort of thing can cause a concentration versus their normal dispersal. We'll go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so feeding may wildlife may attract unwanted animals to your property. Animals will learn to associate humans with food, losing their natural fear of humans. Habituated animals can become aggressive. I think we might have seen a video too of that online of deer having enough.
Mr. Pollard, if I suggest you've got a slide called solutions. You might
sure, let's go to solutions
right now.
And basically the solution to create and implement a bylaw for the town of Port Carling that prohibits the luring, like salt licks and attractants and feeding of wildlife, deer, raccoons, bears, coyotes, foxes, etc. It seems sensible to still allow property owners outside of Port Carling to feed animals, the intention of harvesting animals, such as hunters and that sort of thing, right? It's we have a strong hunting tradition in Muskoka, and it's a big part of regulating those animals and those populations. Schedule A, bylaw 2009-06 is the gun discharge bylaw. And to me, it makes sense that if I can't shoot, or, you know, if you're not allowed to shoot them, it should be also not allowed to lure them in those areas.
All right, well, thank you. Let me turn it over to committee for any questions. Councillor Nishikawa.
My question is through you to staff. How do we bring a resolution or bylaw forward based on the information we've been given? And also, I also want to make sure that we're not overstepping. Like I believe it's a township wide bylaw. It is not restricted to certain areas. Being that person that lives amongst the wildlife, it is absolutely detrimental to start feeding the wildlife. And I'm surrounded by lots and lots of acreage. I'm just saying that just means more roadkill.
So the suggestion was, you know, do we want to bring this forward, and if so, how? Would be the key point. Director Pink.
Thank you. Through you, I look to Mr. Kennedy. I think he can speak more intelligently as to the authority to regulate these bylaws. But I think the proper first step is, if you wish, we could ask for a staff report to come back on the issue, and we can go from there. I think you need to consider public engagement, obviously, through that process. I would just take the opportunity, though, just to point out, as you heard from Mr. Kennedy on his earlier presentation, these are their busiest months. Honestly, we were getting pressure for proactive enforcement. We can't respond to the formal complaints that do come in. We've been tasked with a short-term rental bylaw that really could consume probably both staff's time completely on their own. We have several, over 100 people, I think, registered just for this Friday's open house. It's a big issue. So I just caution committee that, you know, this might be a reasonable project for perhaps over the winter months. But if you wish, we can certainly try to return with a future staff report. But I think you might want to hear from Mr. Kennedy as to the, you know, again, the authorities and the pros and cons of such a bylaw. I'm not personally overly familiar with it. I see Mr. Hammond also may wish to speak.
CEO Hammond, if you had comments.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just further to Mr. Pink's comments, I think, you know, a bylaw has been suggested by the delegate, but it's not the only means to address the issue. I mean, public education is a big piece too, right? So I'm not sure the bylaw is the first stop. Having said that, I think the approaches can be explored through the staff report. And so I think that's perhaps a good suggestion of Mr. Pink's. Thank you so much.
Mr. Kennedy?
Through the chair, as far as authority goes, the municipal act does allow us to create bylaws in regards to feeding wildlife. The municipalities that I've come from, both did have them, which was Barrie and then the township of Tay. They're relatively short bylaws. However, as Mr. Pink has said, we have a lot on our plate already. On top of short-term rentals, if I don't know, some committee members may recall back in 2021 in the previous term, there was a report done for bylaw enforcement and gave a prioritized list of bylaws. Frankly, the next two bylaws that are existing and do need quite a lot of work are the business licensing bylaw and the property standards bylaw. They're both really old. Even though the business licensing bylaw says 2017, I believe the original was in the 90s or 80s, and that's kept forward. So while I appreciate the ask today, I think if we're going to follow the prioritized list that was approved by council in 2021, if this goes forward, we would have to plug that into that list. And I would suggest that our existing bylaws that I've identified that do need a lot of work to be better enforced should probably be done before this bylaw is created if we go down that road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the rest of committee? Mayor Kelly.
Thank you very much. And through you, thank you, Mr. Pollard. Great initiative. I know you and I communicated on this about 6 months ago, but just a couple of thoughts. In order to protect the priority list that we have, I'm wondering, and just to pick up on something that has already been said, I'm wondering if we can sort of start with the communications effort. I know there's a lot already being done. I think it's Aspen Valley or Aspen Valley. And they highlight almost all of the issues that Mr. Pollard's report, and they added one more, which I think is critical, and that is it would be highly unusual that food we leave out for animals would be compatible with their digestive system, or we're probably killing them with the wrong kinds of food. So if we could sort of piggyback off something they're doing and get that started until we can queue this up at some point in the future to deal with it, if that's the way we want to go.
All right. So to staff, what would you like from us? You want a resolution with sort of a general direction?
Chair, I have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts, or Councillor Roberts. Go ahead.
Thank you. Even though I do agree with support a lot that Mr. Pollard brought forward, I would at this time never support such a proposal. I have reasons for that. And if we did, then it couldn't just be Port Carney. It would have to be all of Muskoka Lakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have a suggested resolution that's been drafted by staff. Let me read it and then we can decide whether we think that's appropriate or not. Be it moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Mazin. Be it resolved that staff be directed to report back to Planning Committee with recommendations on approaches to address the issues related to the feeding of wildlife. General enough with no specific timing, but that gets it on the agenda so we don't forget it. Any discussion on that point? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Carrie. No, I know. I got it. Mr. Pollard, thank you very much. I hope you're happy with the outcome. We have it on our agenda and you've heard the restrictions on how long it might take to get there, but
yeah, I understand.
Thank you very much.
You know, it just Port Carling was a framework just to start with somewhere, and appreciate your time.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Glad you can make it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we should take a lunch break now. An hour lunch break, and we'll come back for the Ontario Land Tribunal status update. I believe that would be Mr. Pink, is it? And that will be it.
Again, thank you, Chair. Any questions on ongoing OLT matters where staff are here to respond?
Anything we should know?
trying to recall any written decisions we've received recently, but as committee members will recall, we have managed to settle most matters, and I think we did recently receive written decisions on one or two of those settlements. Names are eluding me off the top of my head. I don't know if I want to put Mr. Sharp on the spot, but I think we have received some written decisions recently of zoning files that you'd be familiar with. Again, happy to go into the details of specific properties or appeals that committee members may have heard from their constituents on or are curious about.
No more questions. All correspondence listed below was received and is in a matter of public record. I don't know if I need to read that or not, but I did. We have one item left, and that's a motion to adjourn.
I think new business.
Oh, sorry. Well, sorry. Good point. Any new business? Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I just wanted, so I'm pleased with today's agenda and things, but I'm wondering, what's the workload like on the other end? Like we saw for a couple of years, we were really heavily burdened with applications. And yeah, where are we at today?
Director Pink.
Thank you. Through you. It does seem like numbers have dropped off a bit, planning application wise and building permit application wise for the start of 2023. I think part of it, obviously, in 2021 and 22, I would say application numbers were sort of off the charts as an anomaly. So coming back down to earth was somewhat inevitable, or certainly was hopeful that would happen. But both planning and building they have come down a little bit. I'd say bylaw enforcement numbers seem to be going perhaps the opposite direction. They're increasing, which I think is as a result of the resources and increased activity, which is, I think, a good thing, what we wanted to see. But just from a very high level, the numbers have dropped a bit in 2023. Still, it's relatively early in the year, or halfway now, but they are down from last 2 years levels.
Councilor. Okay.
David, do you think that's because of the economy? Like the cost of construction have gone up so much that people are backing off, or is it just, I don't know what else it would be?
It's probably through the chair combination of things, but I would say is I think I've spoke to my peers, and it's not just Township of Muskoka Lakes. I think all of our neighbors and the province in general is seeing a bit of a slowdown in that. And again, I wonder if similar to the general market, inflation, et cetera, things with the pandemic, money was cheap. We saw a lot of development activity. Interest rates are now increasing and things are starting to come down to earth. And I think that likely is having some impact. With that said, in my experience here, there have been other national or global, recessions or downturns, and it hasn't impacted Townships Muskoka Lakes particularly. We tend to stay pretty steady. This may be one of the few times, that we're sort of more the norm and dropping with others, and it might be a combination of the interest rates. So it's probably, again, a combination of all those things. Keep in mind too, I think part of the also increase in development activity and applications, the community knew we were going through an official plan amendment or an update, and knew that policies were tightening up. And a lot of people saw the writing on the wall and moved. And now that official plan's hopefully soon to be approved, I think the numbers will accordingly perhaps drop a little bit because you had that bit of a ramp up. So you had a lot of factors really pushing the numbers up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And now that those factors are loosening, it's bound to come back down. I think it's too early to say, this is a trend. It's the first 6 months, but we'll see how things go.
Thank you very much. CEO Hammond would like a word. Oh, Councillor Roberts, do you have your hand up? Yep, go ahead. And then CEO Hammond.
Thank you. I'm just going to pick up on something that Director Pink just mentioned. And correct me if I heard it correctly, but I think you implied that the official plan may be coming back to us soon. I think I read in between the lines. Is that correct or not? Or what? And I guess the second question, when do you foresee that the official plan would be coming back from the district?
Director Ping.
Thank you, and sorry for teasing. Yes, we did provide an update last month, and I'm happy to again. We continue to work diligently with district staff, and I'm hopeful, don't hold me to it, but it looks certainly like we should be able to return to this committee at your August meeting with some modifications from the district for your consideration. Should committee be comfortable, satisfied with those modifications, it would proceed to district council, we hope in September for final approval.
Thank you.
Councillor Berry.
Given the length of that document, if it could be made available to councillors ahead of the agenda, like when you get it and you're satisfied, you and your staff are satisfied with it, that we don't hold it and wait, just so that we've got time to try and digest the changes, because it is I mean, I don't need to tell you how big and complicated a document it is. So for us lay people that actually have to get through plan speak, the more time we can have, I think the better. Please, Director Pink.
Thank you, through the chair. Certainly, we will try to get that agenda out as soon as possible, but keep in mind, although the document itself is very lengthy, full of breadth, what I intend to do with changes is a track change version. So you will see the modifications and you should be able to zero in on them. The changes obviously are going to be significantly less than the full document, and also an accompanying memo that just outlines a high level, a few of the more significant modifications. So you should be able to zero in really on the key changes. And yes, there are some, obviously it's taken some time, and Bill 23 threw some things in. And if council will recall, when the OP was adopted, the direction was to continue discussions with a certain group. So as a result of that, yes, there are some changes. But again, I hope to make it user friendly and you can zero in on those as best you can. But I will try to get that agenda out as soon as possible.
CEO Hammond.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate people want to get to lunch and I don't want to stand in your way, but I do have a question for you. Planning staff undertook the initiative to update their planning reports to sort of lessen the planning speak, as it were, or restructure them. So just curious as to your thoughts or any feedback in that respect. Thank you so much.
Councillor Berry, Councillor Mazin.
It was fantastic. I actually think that getting us on that list and letting us see what might be problematic before staff have made a decision has, for me, taken away the need to do anything with changing the way we meet and the procedural timelines. So I'm pretty happy with, we're going to be able to see and understand what's going on. If there are potential issues, talk to some constituents, or at least try and get to the piece, potentially get to staff with things that might not be entirely 100% correct coming from outside. Because there are always two facts, I think. So I personally commend the initiative and think that it is going to go a long way to solving some of the problems I think certainly for me and some of the fellow councillors have had at being able to have enough time to get and into the depth of that planning application before a decision's made, where we recognize that once a decision's made, it's pretty much made, right?
CEO
So thank you.
and then Councillor Mazin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Councillor Berry, for clarity for members of committee. So last month we started circulating you applications as soon as we circulated the public. So that's the process change that we've made. So, and I hadn't raised that, but thank you for that. My question was more in relation to the layout of the reports, the written reports that you received. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Mazin.
As I was reading these, I was wondering if it was me or if it had changed, and I was going to ask you afterwards. So I'm glad you brought this up because I found these a lot more user friendly. So thank you. And specifically, I was just rushing as you said that, because how you even have consolidated the agency and public comments. Oh, so much easier. It's consolidating it and making it a much easier process for us to go through. So I'm glad you brought that up. I thought it was me the other day.
Director Pink.
Yeah, sorry, not to belabor. I'm happy to hear the good news, but just to highlight, I think what we try to do or what we heard is One, you'll see a bit of an executive summary at the front under report highlights, which I think I've heard over the years, and also trying to move sort of the analysis more upfront as opposed to later. But then also try to streamline lengthy policy and kind of end the public submissions into needs. So I'm happy to hear that, but happy to hear more comments, but those are the high level changes. So glad to see they were well received. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, for reminding me. I was going to ask.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I owe the debt of thanks to our deputy clerk. She's the one that reminded me. So, but on behalf of staff, thank you so much for the positive feedback. Much appreciated.
I have one more resolution to read. Moved by Mayor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Zabit. Be it resolved that the planning committee meeting adjourn at 12:22 p.m. and that the next regular planning committee meeting will be held on Thursday, August the 17th, 2023 at 9 a.m. via an electronically and in-person hybrid format from the council chambers, municipal offices in the beautiful downtown Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Everyone have a great